The control paradox. Why more freedom can feel like less. We all crave control over our lives, our choices, our futures. The idea of freedom is deeply embedded in our societies. But here's the paradox. The more control we have, the more out of control we often feel. Think about modern life. We have unprecedented control over what we eat, where we live, what we watch, and even who we date. Technology has removed barriers, giving us near limitless possibilities. Yet, instead of feeling empowered, we often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and uncertain. Why? Because control itself comes with a cost. The more choices we have, the more responsibility we bear for making the right one. Every decision carries the weight of potential regret, making us hesitant and dissatisfied, much like the paradox of choice. Research shows that too much freedom can lead to decision fatigue, stress, and even dissatisfaction. In contrast, people who embrace limits, whether through routines, traditions, or self-imposed restrictions, often feel happier and more in control. This paradox also applies to leadership and power. The more control a leader has, the more they must micromanage, often making them feel burdened rather than free. True power isn't about having absolute control. It's about knowing what to let go of. The control paradox teaches us that freedom isn't just about having more choices. It's about understanding what truly matters and making peace with what we cannot control. The tolerance paradox. When tolerance becomes self-destructive. Can a truly tolerant society remain tolerant if it accepts intolerance? This is the tolerance paradox, first introduced by philosopher Karl Popper. In a free society, people should express beliefs openly. But what happens when an ideology rejects tolerance and seeks to suppress others? If society tolerates this, it risks being destroyed by the very forces it allows to exist. However, refusing to tolerate the intolerant seems to contradict the principle of tolerance itself. Popper argued that unlimited tolerance leads to the erosion of tolerance. If intolerant groups gain power unchecked, they can eliminate the freedoms that allowed them to rise. His controversial solution: a tolerant society must defend itself by rejecting those who actively undermine it. This idea raises complex real-world questions. Should free speech protect hate speech? Some argue that allowing all ideas promotes open debate, while others warn that unchecked intolerance breeds extremism. History has shown that permissiveness toward authoritarian movements, like those in early 20th century Europe, enabled dictatorships to dismantle democracy from within. But where should the line be drawn? Not all disagreements are dangerous. If intolerance is too broadly defined, it can be used to silence opposing views rather than protect society. Ultimately, the tolerance paradox challenges us to strike a balance between freedom and protection. True tolerance doesn't mean allowing destruction. It means defending the principles that keep society open, free, and just. Friendship. Paradox. Why your friends seem more popular. Ever feel like your friends have more friends than you? It's not just in your head. It's a real phenomenon called the friendship paradox. In any social network, some people have many friends, while others have just a few. Those with more connections are simply more likely to be in your circle, making it seem like everyone around you is more popular. If someone has 100 friends, they have 100 chances to befriend you, while someone with just 2 friends has only 2. This creates an illusion. Your social circle looks more connected than it actually is. This effect is amplified by social media. Your feed is dominated by the most active, connected people, showing only their highlights, vacations, parties, achievements. This distorted perspective can fuel comparison, leading to anxiety and self-doubt. Beyond psychology, this paradox shapes public health and marketing. Influencers and highly connected individuals drive trends and spread information. The key takeaway: your perception of success, happiness, and popularity is often skewed. Instead of comparing, focus on meaningful connections, because quality matters more than quantity. The paradox of choice, when more becomes less. Imagine craving ice cream. You enter a shop and see 50 flavors instead of the usual 5. At first, the variety excites you, but soon you feel overwhelmed. What if you choose the wrong one? What if another flavor is better? This is the paradox of choice. The idea that more options don't always bring freedom, but stress, indecision, and regret. Psychologist Barry Schwartz argued that excessive choices paralyze decision-making. Have you ever spent ages picking a movie, only to re-watch something familiar? Too many choices make it harder to decide, fearing we'll miss out. Even after choosing, we often feel post-decision regret, questioning if another option would have been better. This is due to opportunity cost. When choices are abundant, what we don't choose seems more significant. Some people, called maximizers, obsess over making the best possible choice, often leading to dissatisfaction. Satisficers, on the other hand, choose quickly and move on, experiencing more contentment. In a world overflowing with options, we can fight decision fatigue by embracing good enough choices, limiting our options, and simplifying decisions. True happiness doesn't come from endless possibilities. It comes from appreciating the choices we make. The social paradox: why we feel lonely in a connected world. We've never been more connected. Social media allows instant communication, and we can talk to anyone, anywhere. Yet paradoxically, people feel lonelier than ever. This is the social paradox, the idea that digital connection can actually increase feelings of isolation. Social media shows us filtered highlights of others' lives, making our own seem dull in comparison. Endless notifications simulate social interaction, but lack real emotional depth. Why? Because true connection requires presence, depth, and vulnerability. Things that can't be replaced by likes, messages, or short interactions. When we replace real conversations with digital ones, we miss the true emotional bonds that make us feel connected. The value paradox: why the essential is often undervalued. Why is water, which sustains life, cheap while diamonds, which serve no survival purpose, are so expensive? This is the value paradox, an economic puzzle first introduced by Adam Smith. Water is necessary for survival. We drink it, grow food with it, and use it daily. Yet in most places it's inexpensive. Diamonds, though non-essential, are among the most expensive materials on Earth. The answer lies in two types of value: utility value, how useful something is. Water has high utility. Exchange value, how much something is worth in a market. Diamonds are rare and in demand. This paradox is explained by marginal utility. The more abundant something is, the less valuable each additional unit becomes. If you're dying of thirst, a glass of water is priceless. But when water is abundant, it holds little value. Diamonds remain scarce, keeping their perceived worth high. Markets don't price things based on necessity, but on scarcity and demand. That's why luxury goods, despite lacking practical use, command high prices. Beyond economics, this paradox highlights our priorities. Do we value what sustains us, clean air, water, and community, or chase status symbols? It reminds us that true value isn't just about price. It's about what truly matters. The solution: prioritize depth over quantity. Instead of more digital interactions, focus on fewer, deeper connections. Because real relationships aren't measured in likes, but in moments of genuine presence. The expectation paradox. Why happiness shrinks when we chase it. Happiness seems simple. We believe that if we achieve certain goals, success, wealth, love, we will finally be happy. But paradoxically, the more we chase happiness, the more elusive it becomes. Why? Because expectations shape reality. When we expect something to bring us joy, we build it up in our minds. If it falls short, even slightly, it feels disappointing. This is the same reason why winning the lottery doesn't make people permanently happier. They quickly adapt and start wanting more. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. As we achieve goals, our happiness briefly spikes, then resets, leaving us craving the next big thing. More is never enough. The expectation paradox is everywhere. Social media amplifies it, showing us curated highlights of others' lives, making our own successes feel smaller. We achieve what we once dreamed of, only to ask, what's next, instead of feeling fulfilled. So how do we escape this paradox? By redefining happiness. Studies show that people who focus on the present moment, gratitude and personal growth, feel more fulfilled than those constantly chasing future rewards. True happiness isn't about getting what we want. It's about wanting what we have. The expectation paradox reminds us that fulfillment comes not from chasing more, but from embracing what is already enough. The knowledge paradox. Why more information can make us less certain. We live in the information age, where knowledge is more accessible than ever. Yet paradoxically, the more we know, the more uncertain we become. The knowledge paradox states that every new discovery raises more questions than it answers. Science explains how the universe works, but deeper mysteries remain unsolved. The more history we uncover, the more perspectives emerge, making truth feel elusive. This paradox affects daily life. The internet gives us endless knowledge, but also endless contradictions, leaving us unsure of what to believe. The most educated experts often express the greatest uncertainty, while those with little knowledge hold the strongest opinions, a phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Why does this happen? Because true wisdom isn't about collecting facts, it's about understanding complexity. Knowledge humbles us, revealing how much we still don't know. So, what's the takeaway? Certainty is comforting, but embracing uncertainty is essential for growth. The more we learn, the more we must accept that some mysteries may never be solved. And that's okay. Crocodile paradox. A trap of logic and power. Imagine this. Your child has been snatched by a crocodile. You stand at the river's edge, heart pounding. The crocodile stares at you and says, "I will return your child if, and only if, you correctly predict what I will do next." This isn't just a life or death moment. It's a perfect logical trap. No matter your answer, you're caught in a paradox that has confounded thinkers for centuries. The illusion of choice. You have two possible answers. Scenario 1. You predict the crocodile will return your child. If it intends to, your prediction is correct, and it keeps its promise. But if it plans to keep the child, your prediction is wrong, and the promise doesn't apply. Everything remains logically consistent. Scenario 2. You predict it will not return your child. If the crocodile planned to keep the child, your prediction is correct, forcing it to return the child, creating a contradiction. But if it planned to return the child, your prediction is incorrect, meaning it shouldn't return them. Either way, the paradox collapses on itself. The nature of the trap. This is a self-referential paradox, much like the liar's paradox. This statement is false. If true, it must be false. If false, it must be true. The crocodile paradox works the same way, trapping logic in an impossible loop. But this isn't just an abstract puzzle. It reflects real-world flaws in contracts, politics, and power structures, where rules are designed to be unwinnable. Can this be solved? Philosophers agree, this paradox isn't meant to be solved, only understood. It teaches us a deeper truth. Not every problem has an answer. Not every game is fair. Sometimes the wisest move is to step back, recognize the trap, and refuse to play at all. The paradox of thrift. Why saving can harm the economy. Saving money is seen as responsible and wise. But paradoxically, if everyone saves too much at once, the economy suffers. This is the paradox of thrift, where individual saving can lead to collective economic decline. Imagine a town where everyone cuts spending. Businesses lose customers, jobs disappear, and a recession deepens. While saving is beneficial individually, excessive thrift shrinks demand, harming society as a whole. Economist John Maynard Keynes highlighted this paradox during the Great Depression. He argued that when people save instead of spending, economic activity slows, worsening downturns. His solution? Government spending to stimulate demand and create jobs. However, not everyone agrees. Critics argue that saving fuels long-term growth by leading to investment and innovation. Others worry that excessive government spending can create debt and financial instability. Beyond economics, this paradox reflects human psychology. Fear of uncertainty leads to saving, but widespread fear stalls recovery. When people feel confident, they spend more, fueling economic growth. The paradox of thrift teaches us a crucial lesson. The economy is deeply interconnected. Personal financial habits don't exist in isolation. They shape the entire system. The key is balance, knowing when to save and when to spend. The success paradox. Why chasing success often leads to failure. We believe relentless ambition leads to success, but paradoxically, the more we obsess over success, the more likely we are to fail. This is the success paradox. The idea that when success becomes the goal itself, we lose sight of what actually creates it. Athletes who fixate on winning often choke under pressure. Entrepreneurs who chase quick success take shortcuts, leading to failure. Even in relationships, desperation to impress often backfires. Why? Because true success comes from focus, not obsession. When we fixate on outcomes, we lose creativity, adaptability, and joy in the process, all of which are necessary for true achievement. The takeaway: success is a byproduct of mastery, consistency, and passion, not desperate pursuit. The more you focus on getting better instead of just winning, the more success follows naturally. The fear paradox. Why avoiding fear makes it stronger. We fear failure, rejection, and discomfort, so we avoid situations that make us uneasy. But paradoxically, the more we avoid fear, the stronger it grows. This is the fear paradox, the idea that facing fear weakens it, while avoiding it magnifies it. Studies show that people who avoid anxiety-inducing situations actually make their fears worse. Social anxiety grows when we stay isolated, and fear of failure deepens when we never take risks. Why? Because our brains learn through exposure. The more we confront discomfort, the more we normalize it, making it less powerful over time. But when we avoid fear, it reinforces itself, making us believe it's too big to handle. The lesson: courage isn't about eliminating fear. It's about acting despite it. The only way to weaken fear is to face it, step by step, until it loses its power over you. The time paradox. Why the more we try to save time, the less we have. We are obsessed with saving time. Faster internet, meal delivery, automation, everything is designed to give us more free time. Yet paradoxically, the more time we save, the less time we seem to have. This is the time paradox, the idea that technological efficiency doesn't free us. It traps us in busyness. Email was meant to reduce paperwork, yet we now check it constantly. Faster communication means we're expected to reply instantly, leaving no time to disconnect. Why does this happen? Because when time-saving tools make tasks easier, we take on more tasks. Instead of freeing time, we fill it with more obligations, distractions, and commitments, leaving us feeling more overwhelmed than ever. The solution? Instead of trying to save time, focus on how you spend it. Setting boundaries, eliminating unnecessary commitments, and prioritizing what truly matters are the real keys to having more time, not less. The simplicity paradox. Why making things easy can make life harder. We crave convenience. Apps, automation, and smart devices promise to simplify life. But paradoxically, the easier things become, the harder they sometimes feel. This is the simplicity paradox. When GPS removes the need for navigation, we forget how to read maps. When autocorrect fixes our mistakes, our spelling gets worse. When everything is instantly available, patience disappears. Technology removes friction, but in doing so, it weakens the skills and mental resilience we once relied on. Instead of simplifying life, it often creates dependence, making us struggle more when things don't work as expected. This paradox appears in problem solving too. The easier solutions are handed to us, the less we develop critical thinking. The more convenient technology becomes, the more frustrating it feels when it fails. The takeaway. True simplicity isn't about removing effort, it's about strengthening ability. Convenience should support us, not replace the skills that make us adaptable and capable. The innovation paradox. Why progress creates more problems. We celebrate innovation as the key to solving humanity's biggest challenges. Technology, medicine, and automation promise to make life easier, safer, and more efficient. But paradoxically, the more we innovate, the more problems we create. Take automation. It was meant to free us from work, yet people today feel busier than ever. Medical advances have increased life expectancy, yet healthcare systems struggle under the weight of aging populations. Social media was designed to connect us, yet loneliness is at an all-time high. This is the innovation paradox. Progress often solves one problem while creating another. The very tools meant to simplify life introduce new complexities, dependencies, and unintended consequences. Why does this happen? Because innovation amplifies expectations. The more solutions we create, the higher our standards rise, making us less satisfied with what we already have. The lesson? Innovation should be about balance, not just progress. We must ask, are we solving real problems or just shifting them? True progress comes not just from advancing technology, but from understanding its impact on human well-being. The growth paradox. Why chasing growth can lead to decline. We assume growth equals progress, that businesses, economies, and even individuals should always aim to expand, improve, and scale up. But paradoxically, unchecked growth often leads to instability, inefficiency, or collapse. Consider companies that expand too fast. They struggle to maintain quality, service, and control. The Roman Empire, once unstoppable, became too large to govern, leading to its downfall. Even in personal life, chasing constant self-improvement can lead to burnout and dissatisfaction. This is the growth paradox, the idea that sustainable success often comes from knowing when to stop expanding. Growth isn't always good. Sometimes stability and efficiency matter more than endless expansion. The solution: intentional growth. Instead of mindlessly scaling up, the key is to grow only when it serves long-term stability and well-being. Sometimes, progress means learning when enough is enough. The self-improvement paradox. Why trying to be better can make you feel worse. Self-improvement is supposed to make us happier, stronger, and more successful. But paradoxically, the more we focus on improving ourselves, the more inadequate we often feel. Why? Because self-improvement is built on the idea that who you are right now isn't good enough. The more we compare ourselves to an ideal version of ourselves, the more we notice our flaws. No matter how much we improve, there's always another level to reach, so we never feel complete. This is the self-improvement paradox. Chasing personal growth can create endless dissatisfaction. Many people burn out because they're always working toward better, without appreciating where they are. The solution: balance growth with self-acceptance. Improve not because you hate where you are, but because you enjoy the process. Growth should feel exciting, not like a never-ending race you can't win. The stability-instability paradox. Why more? Security can create more risk. The more we try to create stability, the more instability emerges. This is the stability-instability paradox, where efforts to maintain peace and control can actually increase the risk of conflict. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons capable of destroying the world. This created an ironic stability. Neither side wanted full-scale war. But here's the paradox. Because nuclear war was off limits, smaller conflicts increased. The superpowers fought proxy wars in Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan, indirectly fueling regional instability. This paradox appears in other areas too. In cybersecurity, stronger defenses lead to more advanced hacking techniques. In finance, market regulations can create conditions for financial crises. Even in personal relationships, controlling everything too tightly often leads to rebellion. The takeaway: peace and security require more than control. They require adaptability. True stability isn't about eliminating conflict, but managing it wisely. The Sorites paradox. Where do we draw the line? At what point does a pile of sand become a heap? If adding one grain never turns it into a heap, does that mean a heap can never exist? This is the Sorites paradox, which reveals how gradual change challenges our ability to define things clearly. It applies not just to sand, but to baldness, wealth, climate change, and even social justice. How many dollars make someone rich? When does inequality become a crisis? The paradox exists because language struggles with vagueness. Some argue that we should think in degrees rather than absolutes. Others suggest that context determines definitions. A heap might be different on a beach than on a table. The real-world impact of this paradox is huge. Laws rely on vague terms like reasonable doubt or fair wages, allowing flexibility but also creating disputes. Society often demands clear categories, yet reality is messy and uncertain. The lesson: most things in life don't fit into neat boxes. The Sorites paradox reminds us to embrace nuance, complexity, and ambiguity, because in many cases, there is no single, clear answer. The achievement paradox. Why reaching your goal can leave you feeling empty. We spend our lives chasing big goals: financial success, recognition, personal milestones. We believe that once we achieve them, we'll finally feel fulfilled. But paradoxically, the moment we reach our goal, it often feels less satisfying than we expected. This is the achievement paradox, the idea that achieving success doesn't always bring happiness, and sometimes it even creates new dissatisfaction. Why does this happen? Because the pursuit itself gives us purpose. The brain thrives on progress, struggle, and anticipation. But when we finally get what we wanted, the excitement fades. The goal we once thought was everything suddenly feels ordinary, even empty. Athletes feel lost after winning championships. Entrepreneurs feel directionless after selling their companies. Even in relationships, people work so hard to find the one that they don't know what to do next when they finally do. This paradox is fueled by the moving finish line. As soon as we reach one goal, a new one takes its place. Instead of happiness, we feel an urge to chase the next big thing, keeping us in a cycle of never feeling enough. The solution? Find fulfillment in the process, not just the outcome. Instead of measuring success by what you achieve, measure it by how much you enjoy the journey. Because the paradox of achievement is this: what we seek is rarely the goal itself. It's the feeling we think it will give us. The ship of Theseus paradox. What makes you you? If you replace every part of a ship, is it still the same ship? And if someone builds a new ship from the original parts, which one is real? This is the ship of Theseus paradox, which challenges how we define identity. The same question applies to people. Your body's cells regenerate over time. Are you the same person you were a decade ago? If so, is identity based on your physical body, your memories, or something more abstract? This paradox appears everywhere. Cities replace buildings yet remain the same. Traditions evolve, but their essence continues. Even companies, brands, and nations change, yet retain their identity. The paradox teaches us that identity isn't about staying the same. It's about how change is managed. Who we are is not a fixed state, but an ongoing process of transformation. The ship of Theseus shows us that even as we change, something essential remains. But what that something is depends on how we choose to see it. The effort recognition paradox. Why working harder doesn't always get you noticed. We grow up believing that hard work leads to recognition, that if we put in effort, we'll be rewarded. But paradoxically, the harder we work, the more invisible we sometimes become. This is the effort recognition paradox, the idea that efficiency and competence can sometimes work against us. Consider the workplace. Employees who quietly handle their responsibilities with skill often go unnoticed, while those who struggle visibly or promote their efforts get more attention. A worker who solves problems quickly may seem less valuable than one who takes longer, simply because their work appears easier. Why does this happen? Because people value perceived effort over actual efficiency. If something looks effortless, we assume it's easy, even if it required years of skill and practice. This paradox explains why loud, self-promoting individuals often rise faster than quiet high performers. It also applies to creativity and art. A well-polished novel or a perfectly executed painting may seem less impressive than a rough work in progress, because we can't see the labor behind it. The solution? Recognizing and advocating for your own contributions. Hard work alone isn't enough. Sometimes you have to show your effort for it to be valued. The paradox teaches us that success isn't just about skill, but about making sure your work is seen. The catch-22. Paradox. When every choice traps you, you need to prove you're insane to escape, but trying to escape proves you're sane enough to stay. This is catch-22, A paradox where every option contradicts itself, leaving you stuck. Coined from Joseph Heller's novel, Catch-22, this paradox describes no-win situations. In the book, a soldier could only be discharged for insanity, but asking for discharge proved he was sane, trapping him in endless service. Real-life catch-22s happen everywhere. You need experience to get a job, but can't get experience without a job. You need credit history to get approved, but can't build history without approval. Bureaucracies create loops that block progress, where the system itself works against you. Catch-22 isn't just frustrating. It's about power and control. Governments, corporations, and institutions use rigid logic to trap people, making escape impossible unless the rules are changed. The way out: recognizing the paradox and questioning the system. Instead of playing by the rules, sometimes you have to break them or rewrite them entirely. The freedom limitation paradox. Why true freedom requires constraints. We see freedom as the ability to do whatever we want, whenever we want. But paradoxically, without limitations, true freedom becomes impossible. This is the freedom limitation paradox. The idea that real freedom isn't about unlimited choices, but about having the right structure to act meaningfully. Think about language. If we had no grammar rules or structure, we could say anything, but no one would understand us. The limitations of language enable communication, giving us the freedom to express complex ideas. Or consider roads. If cars could drive anywhere, in any direction, chaos would follow. Traffic rules restrict movement, but they enable smooth travel, giving people the freedom to get where they need to go safely and efficiently. Even in personal life, too many options can lead to paralysis and dissatisfaction, like the paradox of choice. People who define clear boundaries, whether in work, relationships, or creativity, often feel more in control, not less. The paradox teaches us that freedom isn't about having no rules. It's about having the right rules. Without structure, everything collapses into disorder. True freedom comes not from doing everything, but from choosing what truly matters. The Grand Hotel Paradox. When full isn't really full. A hotel has infinite rooms, and every room is occupied. Yet a new guest arrives, and somehow there's still space. This is the Grand Hotel Paradox, a thought experiment by David Hilbert that challenges our understanding of infinity. Here's how it works. Each guest moves up one room. Room 1 moves to room 2, room 2 to room 3, and so on. Now, room 1 is empty, even though the hotel was full. What if an infinite number of guests arrive? The receptionist moves each guest to double their room number. Room 1 moves to room 2 to room 4, room 3 to room 5. 6. Now all odd-numbered rooms are free, proving that infinity can absorb more infinity. The paradox teaches us that infinity isn't just a large number. It follows different rules entirely. It has implications in mathematics, physics, and even computing, where infinite processes must be managed. Ultimately, the Grand Hotel Paradox shows us that some ideas defy common sense, but they reveal the deeper, stranger truths about the universe. The Bootstrap Paradox. Can the past be created from the future? Imagine finding a mysterious book filled with detailed instructions on how to build a time machine. You study it, follow its steps, and successfully build one. But here's the twist. After years of using it, you travel back in time and give the book to your younger self. Where did the book come from? Who originally wrote it? This is the Bootstrap Paradox, a famous time travel paradox that questions the origin of information, objects, or even people. If something is passed from the future to the past without ever being created, does it have a real origin at all? The paradox appears in fiction, like a musician who learns to play an instrument from an older version of themselves, then teaches their younger self the same skill. If knowledge, objects, or even people exist without an original creator, it challenges our fundamental understanding of cause and effect. In physics, the bootstrap paradox raises questions about time loops and causality. Could something exist without being created? Does time allow closed loops where events create themselves? The paradox forces us to rethink the flow of time itself. If the past can be influenced by the future, and the future is shaped by the past, then where does anything truly begin? The bootstrap paradox reminds us that time isn't always as simple as we think, and that sometimes the biggest mystery isn't where we're going, but where we came from. Schrödinger's cat. When reality is uncertain. A cat is locked in a box. It's both alive and dead, until you look. This is Schrödinger's cat, a famous thought experiment by physicist Erwin Schrödinger to illustrate the paradoxes of quantum mechanics. Inside the box is a cat, a radioactive atom, a detector, and poison. If the atom decays, the detector triggers the poison, killing the cat. If the atom doesn't decay, the cat lives. But in quantum physics, particles exist in both states at once, a concept called superposition. That means, until the box is opened, the cat is both alive and dead, existing in two realities simultaneously. This paradox challenges our understanding of observation and reality. Does measuring something create its state? Some interpretations suggest that all possible outcomes exist in parallel universes, while others argue that quantum effects disappear as they scale up to our world. Schrödinger's cat isn't just theoretical. It connects to real-world quantum technologies, from lasers to quantum computers. It forces us to question, does reality exist before we observe it? Or is the universe far stranger than we ever imagined? The effort-happiness paradox. Why chasing happiness makes it harder to find. We all want to be happy. We read self-help books, set goals, and chase experiences that promise fulfillment. But paradoxically, the more we actively seek happiness, the more it seems to slip away. This is the effort-happiness paradox. The idea that happiness isn't something you can chase directly. It's something that happens when you stop trying so hard. Think about the last time you felt truly happy. It probably wasn't because you were obsessively searching for happiness. Instead, it happened naturally, while spending time with loved ones, pursuing a passion, or simply being present. Studies show that people who obsess over happiness often end up feeling more anxious and less satisfied. Why? Because focusing on happiness creates pressure, making us constantly evaluate whether we feel happy enough. This self-monitoring pulls us out of the present moment, preventing us from actually enjoying life. The paradox extends to relationships and success. When we desperately seek love, we often push people away. When we force creativity, ideas refuse to flow. Happiness, like these things, is often a byproduct of meaningful experiences, not an end goal in itself. The solution? Let go of the need to be happy all the time. Focus on engaging fully in life, embracing challenges, and appreciating small moments. When you stop trying to force happiness, you might just find that it naturally appears. The Fermi paradox. Where is everyone? The universe is massive. With trillions of planets, intelligent life should exist somewhere. And yet, despite years of searching, we've found nothing. No signals, no spacecraft, no alien civilizations. This is the Fermi paradox. If life is out there, why haven't we seen any evidence? There are many possible explanations. Life is rare. Perhaps intelligence is an extreme fluke. They're too far away. Signals take time to reach us. They stay silent. Aliens may avoid us on purpose. The zoo hypothesis. They self-destruct. Civilizations may wipe themselves out before colonizing space. We don't recognize them. Alien life could exist in forms we can't comprehend. The Fermi paradox raises unsettling questions. Are we alone? If not, why is the universe so silent? And if we truly are the only intelligent life, then our role in the cosmos is far more important than we ever realized. The unexpected hanging paradox. When logic fails. Imagine a judge sentences a prisoner to a surprise hanging. The execution will happen on a weekday, but the prisoner won't know which day until the moment it occurs. The prisoner, thinking logically, tries to eliminate possibilities. He reasons, if the hanging were on Friday, he would know by Thursday night. So Friday is impossible. If Thursday was the last possible day, then by Wednesday night, he'd figure it out. So Thursday is also impossible. Following this logic, he eliminates every day, concluding that the hanging can't happen at all. But one morning, the guards arrive unexpectedly, and the execution takes place, proving the prisoner's logic was flawed. This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a thought experiment that exposes the limits of logic and how predicting an event can sometimes change its outcome. The real-world implications. This paradox doesn't just apply to prisoners, it appears everywhere in life. Stock markets. If investors predict a crash, they sell early, preventing the crash. Sports psychology. If a team is expected to win, they might become overconfident and lose. Self-fulfilling prophecies. If students believe a test will be easy, they study less and perform worse. Why does this happen? At its core, the paradox reveals a flaw in human reasoning. The prisoner's logic assumes that eliminating all options eliminates the event itself, but reality doesn't work that way. By assuming too much certainty, we sometimes trap ourselves in faulty conclusions. What can we learn? The unexpected hanging paradox teaches us that certainty is often an illusion. Just because we think we've ruled out possibilities doesn't mean reality won't surprise us. It reminds us that in life, predictions don't always come true. Logic can be misleading. And sometimes, the biggest surprises come from things we believed were impossible. The barber paradox. When logic defeats itself. Imagine a small town where only one barber is responsible for shaving people. But there's a strict rule. The barber only shaves those who don't shave themselves. If someone chooses to shave on their own, the barber doesn't touch them. But if they don't shave, the barber must step in. Now, here's the problem. Who shaves the barber? If he shaves himself, he violates the rule because the barber only shaves those who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he falls into the category of people the barber must shave, meaning he should be shaving himself. Either way, the logic collapses into a contradiction. This is the barber paradox, a thought experiment introduced by Bertrand Russell to highlight a deeper issue in mathematics and logic. It's an example of what happens when a rule refers to itself in a way that makes it impossible to follow. Russell created this paradox to illustrate an even bigger problem in set theory. He asked, what happens if we consider a set that contains all sets that don't contain themselves? If this set includes itself, then by definition, it shouldn't. But if it doesn't include itself, then it should. Just like the barber, the rule creates a logical loop that breaks itself. This paradox isn't just a theoretical puzzle, it has real-world implications. In computer programming, Self-referential loops can cause software systems to crash. In legal systems, contradictory laws sometimes make enforcement impossible. Even in philosophy and language, paradoxes like "this sentence is false" create endless logical loops that challenge our understanding of truth. The Barber paradox teaches us a critical lesson about logic and reasoning. Not every problem has a solution within its own system. Sometimes, when a rule creates contradictions, the only way to resolve the issue is to step back and rethink the entire framework. It reminds us that logic isn't always absolute, and even the most carefully constructed systems can contain hidden contradictions that force us to question everything we assume to be true. The observer's dilemma. Does reality exist without you? Imagine walking into a completely empty room. No sounds, no movement, just silence. Now here's the question. Was the room truly silent before you entered? Or does silence only exist because you noticed it? This is the observer's dilemma, a paradox that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality. It forces us to ask, does something exist if it isn't being observed? Or does observation itself shape what is real? At first, it seems like a simple question. Of course, the room was silent before you entered, right? But what proof do you have? You weren't there. Without an observer, can we say with certainty that anything, sound, light, movement, existed in the way we assume? This paradox takes inspiration from quantum mechanics, where particles exist in a state of uncertainty until they are observed. In the famous double-slit experiment, light behaves both as a wave and a particle, but only when it's measured does it choose one form. It's as if reality waits for someone to look before deciding what it should be. Now, apply this to everyday life. When you leave a room, does the furniture exist exactly as it was? Or does it only return to that state when you re-enter? If an event happens but no one experiences it, can it truly be said to have happened at all? The observer's dilemma questions whether the world around us is an independent reality or a creation shaped by our perception. Could it be that the universe only takes form because we are here to see it? If that's true, then what happens when no one is watching? The sword and shield paradox. When absolutes collide. Imagine a merchant standing in a marketplace, boasting about his incredible weapons. He holds up a sword and proclaims, "This sword is so sharp, it can cut through anything." Then he picks up a shield and declares, "And this shield is so strong it can block any attack." A curious onlooker steps forward and asks, "What happens if your sword strikes your shield?" The merchant freezes. The contradiction is obvious. If the sword can cut through anything, it must pierce the shield. But if the shield can block anything, it must stop the sword. Both claims can't be true at the same time. The very logic that made them seem powerful now makes them impossible. This is the sword and shield paradox, also known as the paradox of the irresistible force and the immovable object. It highlights a deep problem with absolute claims. When two unstoppable forces collide, something has to give. This paradox first appeared in ancient China, where merchants exaggerated the quality of their weapons, only to be caught in their own contradictions. But beyond weapons, this paradox applies to the real world in ways we might not expect. Consider security versus freedom. A society that demands absolute security often restricts personal freedoms, but a society with absolute freedom may struggle to maintain security. The two ideals seem reasonable on their own, but when taken to their extremes, they clash in the same way as the sword and shield. In logic, absolute claims often break down when they meet their limits. If someone says, "I never lie," What happens if they say, I am lying right now? Like the sword and shield, the statement contradicts itself. So what's the solution? There isn't one, at least not within the paradox itself. The lesson is that absolutes rarely hold up in a complex world. The truth is often found in the balance, not in extremes. The doppelganger paradox. Are you really you? Imagine walking alone at night, feeling the quiet hum of the world around you. Everything seems normal, until you turn a corner and see yourself. Not just someone who looks like you, but an exact replica. Same clothes, same expression, same thoughts. They stare at you, mirroring your shock. If you are standing here right now, who are they? This is the doppelganger paradox, a disturbing thought experiment that forces us to question what makes us who we are. If an identical version of you suddenly appeared, with the same memories, personality, and thoughts, would they still be you? Or would they be someone else entirely? At first, the answer seems simple. You are the real one. They must be a copy, an imposter. But how do you prove that? If they think exactly as you do, if they remember the same childhood, the same experiences, if they even believe they are the original, what separates you from them? If you swapped places, would anyone be able to tell? Would you even know the difference? This paradox ties into an age-old philosophical debate. What defines personal identity? Is it our physical body? Then why do we still feel like ourselves, even though our cells regenerate every few years? Is it our consciousness? Then what happens if someone could copy it perfectly? If a machine scanned your brain and recreated every thought, would the copy be you? Or would it just be another person, living your life but disconnected from the original? This paradox raises an unsettling possibility. What if our sense of self is an illusion? What if we are just patterns, easily duplicated under the right conditions? It challenges the way we think about individuality, authenticity, and the nature of existence itself. And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, if you ever meet your own perfect copy, what happens next? The Pinocchio paradox. When truth and lies collide. Imagine Pinocchio, the wooden puppet whose nose grows whenever he tells a lie. Now picture him saying, "My nose will now grow." This simple sentence creates an unsolvable loop. If his nose grows, then he must have been lying. But if he was lying, then his nose should not have grown, because it would mean he was telling the truth. On the other hand, if his nose doesn't grow, then his statement was false, meaning it should grow. No matter what happens, logic collapses into contradiction. This is the Pinocchio paradox, a self-referential puzzle that challenges how we define truth, lies, and cause and effect. It's similar to the famous liar's paradox, where a sentence like, "This statement is false," creates an endless loop. But what makes Pinocchio's version unique is that it links the contradiction to a physical consequence, his nose growing. At its core, this paradox exposes the limits of language and logic. We like to believe statements are either true or false, but the Pinocchio paradox shows that sometimes reality doesn't fit neatly into those categories. If truth depends on an event, but the event depends on truth, how do we determine what's real? Beyond philosophy, this paradox has practical implications. In computer science, self-referential code can create infinite loops, crashing systems. In legal systems, contradictory laws can make it impossible to determine the right course of action. Even in psychology, overthinking can trap people in endless mental loops, much like Pinocchio's impossible statement. So, what's the solution? There isn't one. The paradox exists to highlight the flaws in absolute reasoning. It reminds us that truth can be more complex than it seems, and that some questions don't have clear answers. In the end, the Pinocchio paradox is more than a fun riddle. It's a glimpse into the strange, tangled nature of reality itself. The dichotomy paradox. Can you ever truly move? Imagine you need to cross a room. Before reaching the other side, you must first get halfway there. Before reaching halfway, you must travel a quarter of the distance. Before the quarter, you must cover an eighth. This process continues infinitely, each step requiring you to travel half the remaining distance. At first, this seems logical. But if you must complete an infinite number of steps to cross the room, how can you ever reach the other side? This is Zeno's dichotomy paradox, an ancient Greek thought experiment that questions the nature of motion, space, and infinity. On the surface, it suggests that movement should be impossible, yet we cross rooms, streets, and entire countries without a second thought. So where is the flaw in this reasoning? Mathematics provides an answer. The sequence of distances, half, a quarter, an eighth, and so on, forms an infinite series that converges to a finite sum. This means that although the process involves infinitely many steps, the total distance remains limited. In reality, motion is continuous, not a sequence of distinct jumps, allowing us to move without contradiction. But the paradox raises deeper questions. Is space infinitely divisible? Modern physics suggests it might not be. Quantum mechanics introduces the concept of Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space, which suggests there is a fundamental limit to how small divisions can be. If space isn't infinitely divisible, then Zeno's infinite steps simply don't exist in reality. Zeno's paradox also highlights how our logical intuitions can fail us. Even though math and physics explain why motion is possible, the paradox forces us to confront the nature of infinity, the limitations of human reasoning, and the hidden complexities of the everyday world. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: even something as simple as walking across a room can hold infinite mysteries. Simpson's paradox. When data lies. Imagine you're choosing between two medical treatments. The statistics show that treatment A has a higher overall success rate than treatment B. It seems like an easy decision. But when you break the data down into subgroups, say younger and older patients, you find that treatment B actually performs better in both groups. How can a treatment be worse in every subgroup, yet still have a higher overall success rate? This is Simpson's paradox, a strange statistical illusion that reveals how data can be misleading depending on how it's grouped. It happens when trends that appear in different groups disappear or reverse when combined, creating a paradox that defies intuition. To understand why this happens, let's look at a real-world example. Imagine a university is accused of gender bias because its overall admission rates show that men are admitted at a higher percentage than women. But when the data is broken down by individual departments, it turns out that in every department, a higher percentage of women were accepted. How is this possible? The answer lies in the composition of the data. Women may have applied more to highly competitive departments with low acceptance rates, while men applied more to departments with higher acceptance rates. The overall numbers appear biased, but within each group, the trend reverses. This paradox isn't just a statistical curiosity. It appears in medicine, politics, economics, and decision-making. A treatment might seem effective in general, but be harmful for specific subgroups. A politician might appear to have broad support, but when broken down by demographics, the numbers tell a different story. Even in sports, aggregated performance data can mask individual game trends. Simpson's paradox teaches us a crucial lesson. Data alone doesn't tell the full story. It must be interpreted carefully to avoid misleading conclusions. Numbers can be manipulated, and how they are grouped changes the narrative. In a world increasingly driven by data, Simpson's paradox reminds us to question the numbers, dig deeper, and never take statistics at face value. The grain of millet paradox. The power of small things. If a single grain of millet falls to the ground, does it make a sound? Probably not. At least not one you can hear. But what if a handful of grains fall? Or an entire sack? At some point, the sound becomes undeniable. This is the grain of millet paradox, an ancient thought experiment that forces us to question perception, thresholds, and the power of accumulation. It challenges us to think about when something goes from being insignificant to noticeable, from silence to sound, from nothing to something. The paradox originated with the Greek philosopher Zeno, known for his mind-bending puzzles. It presents a deceptively simple question. If a single grain makes no sound, then how can many grains together create one? Where does the shift happen? At what moment does something that seems meaningless become meaningful? At its core, this paradox highlights the power of small, incremental changes. It forces us to rethink how we measure progress, impact, and even reality itself. Think about climate change. One car, one plastic bottle, or one light left on seems insignificant. But when billions of people make the same choices, the effect is enormous. Similarly, in personal growth, one day of learning a new skill might seem meaningless, but repeated over months or years, it becomes transformative. This paradox also reveals the limitations of human perception. The sound of a single grain may exist, but we simply can't hear it. The same applies to countless forces shaping our world, things too small, too slow, or too subtle for us to notice, yet profoundly impactful. Ultimately, the grain of millet paradox teaches us that small things matter. Tiny actions, thoughts, and choices accumulate into something significant. Nothing is truly insignificant. Every grain, every effort, and every decision plays a part in shaping reality. The eternal mirror paradox. A reflection that never ends. Imagine standing between two mirrors, facing infinite reflections of yourself stretching into eternity. The first image is clear, the second slightly smaller, and the reflections continue to shrink until they vanish into nothingness. Or do they? If the reflections get infinitely smaller but never quite disappear, does that mean they still exist? This is the eternal mirror paradox, a mind-bending thought experiment that forces us to question perception, infinity, and the limits of reality. It challenges us to consider whether something can be both endless and invisible at the same time. At first glance, it seems logical that reflections will eventually fade. After all, the human eye has limits. We can't perceive images too small or dim. But if something exists in theory, does it still exist, even if we can't see it? This paradox is deeply tied to infinity. Just as numbers continue forever, so do reflections, each one a fraction of the last, stretching beyond the limits of perception. But here's the twist. While the reflections get smaller, they never truly disappear. They persist in an ever-decreasing sequence, forcing us to ask, where does existence end? The eternal mirror paradox has deep implications for science, consciousness, and perception. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in multiple states until observed. In human memory, echoes of the past shape the present, even when they seem long gone. This paradox isn't just about reflections. It's about how we define reality. If something is beyond our perception, does it stop existing, or is it simply beyond our reach? Perhaps reality, like reflections in a mirror, stretches far beyond what we can see, layer upon layer, into infinity. The grandfather paradox. Can you erase your own existence? Imagine stepping into a time machine, setting the dial to decades before you were born, and traveling back to meet your grandfather as a young man. As you observe him, an idea takes hold. What if you prevent him from meeting your grandmother? Whether by accident or on purpose, you stop their relationship from ever forming. That means your parent is never born. And if your parent never exists, neither do you. But here's where the paradox unfolds. If you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time in the first place to stop your grandfather's meeting? Without your existence, there is no time traveler to change the past, which means history should proceed as normal, and you should be born. Yet if you are born, you could still travel back and prevent your birth, creating an endless contradiction. This is the grandfather paradox, one of the most mind-bending problems in time travel logic. The paradox forces us to question the very nature of time and causality. Can the past be changed? If so, does altering it erase the future? And if you undo your own existence, does that mean time resets itself as if you never traveled at all? Some scientists and philosophers suggest parallel timelines as a solution. In this view, when you change history, a new timeline branches off, allowing both realities to exist, the one where you were born and the one where you weren't. This way, your actions in the past don't erase you. They simply create a different version of history. Another theory proposes that time is self-correcting. No matter what you do, events will always realign to prevent paradoxes. Maybe you try to stop your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, but fate intervenes, and they still fall in love by some other means. This keeps the timeline intact and avoids contradictions. Even in physics, the grandfather paradox remains unresolved. Einstein's theory of relativity allows for the possibility of time loops, but it doesn't explain how paradoxes would be prevented. Some physicists speculate that laws of the universe might prevent paradoxical time travel outright, making it impossible to change past events in a way that contradicts your own existence. Beyond time travel, this paradox raises deeper questions about free will and destiny. If the past is fixed and unchangeable, does that mean the future is also predetermined? Or do we truly have the power to alter events, even at the risk of unraveling reality? The grandfather paradox is more than just a thought experiment. It's a reminder that time is one of the greatest mysteries we have yet to solve. Whether or not time travel ever becomes possible, the paradox challenges us to think about how cause and effect shape our world. It reminds us that history is not just a series of events, but a delicate web of connections, where one small change could send ripples through time itself. The Olbers paradox. Why is the night sky dark? Look up at the night sky. The universe is vast, filled with an uncountable number of stars stretching in every direction. So why isn't the sky completely filled with light? If space is infinite and filled with stars, shouldn't every inch of the sky be as bright as the sun? This is Olbers' paradox, a question that has puzzled astronomers and philosophers for centuries. At first, the logic seems simple. In an infinite, eternal universe, no matter where you look, your line of sight should eventually land on a star. Just as a dense forest blocks your view in every direction with trees, an endless universe should be packed with starlight. Yet the night sky is mostly dark. Why? For a long time, scientists tried to solve this paradox by suggesting that cosmic dust might be blocking distant starlight. But that theory doesn't work. If dust absorbed light, it would heat up over time and eventually glow just as brightly. Others suggested that light might simply fade over long distances, but in an infinite universe, there would always be more stars to replace the dim ones, keeping the sky uniformly bright. The real breakthrough came in the 20th century, with two revolutionary discoveries. The universe is not eternal. It has a finite age, approximately 13.8 billion years. That means we can only see light that has had enough time to reach us. Stars farther away than that remain invisible simply because their light hasn't arrived yet. The universe is expanding, and with that expansion, light from distant stars is stretched into longer wavelengths, a process known as redshift. Some of this light becomes invisible to the human eye, shifting into infrared or even radio waves. What looks like empty space to us is actually filled with energy, just outside our visual range. The dark sky, then, isn't a failure of science. It's a window into the nature of the universe itself. The vast stretches of darkness reveal that the cosmos had a beginning and has been evolving ever since. The cosmic microwave background radiation, a faint glow left over from the Big Bang, is further evidence that the universe isn't static, but has a dynamic history. Olber's paradox is more than just a curiosity about the night sky. It's a reminder of the scale and complexity of the universe. It challenges our assumptions, showing us that the way things appear is often not the full story. It also highlights the power of scientific discovery, how physics, cosmology, and astronomy come together to solve some of the biggest mysteries of existence. So, the next time you look up at the night sky, don't see the darkness as empty. Instead, see it for what it truly is, a profound clue about the origins, expansion, and nature of the universe itself. The Raven Paradox. Can a green apple prove all ravens are black? Imagine someone tells you that spotting a green apple can somehow prove that all ravens are black. It sounds absurd, right? How could something as unrelated as an apple's color tell us anything about ravens? Yet this is exactly what Hempel's paradox, also known as the Raven Paradox, suggests. It's a mind-bending puzzle that forces us to rethink how we interpret evidence, logic, and the nature of knowledge itself. The paradox was first introduced by German philosopher Carl Gustav Hempel in the 1940s. It starts with a simple logical statement: all ravens are black. This statement can be rewritten in an equivalent form. If something is not black, then it is not a raven. These two sentences say the same thing, just in different ways. But here's where the paradox kicks in. If we want to prove that all ravens are black, we might expect to do this by observing black ravens. Every black raven we see strengthens the claim. But logically, any non-black object that is not a raven, like a green apple, also supports the statement. Why? Because if we find a green apple, it confirms the idea that a non-black thing is not a raven. By this reasoning, spotting a blue chair, a red car, or a white cloud all contribute to proving that all ravens are black, even though they seem completely unrelated. This contradicts our intuition. Seeing a black raven feels like strong evidence for the claim, while seeing a green apple feels completely irrelevant. But from a purely logical standpoint, both provide the same type of confirmation. This paradox exposes the gap between formal logic and human intuition. In strict logical reasoning, any supporting evidence counts, no matter how indirect. But in practice, we judge evidence by how informative or relevant it feels. Seeing 100 black ravens strengthens our belief far more than 100 green apples, even though both technically fit the logical framework. The Raven Paradox also highlights issues in scientific reasoning. In science, we often try to confirm hypotheses through observation, but this paradox shows that not all forms of confirmation are equally meaningful. It challenges us to think critically about what counts as strong evidence and how we interpret data. It also has psychological implications. Human brains prioritize certain types of evidence over others. We naturally focus on patterns that seem directly connected to what we're testing, rather than abstract logical equivalences. This bias influences everything from scientific research to decision-making in everyday life. So what can we learn from the Raven paradox? First, it reminds us that logic and intuition don't always align, and we should be careful when interpreting data. Second, it highlights how context and relevance shape our perception of evidence. And finally, it encourages us to think critically about the way we form beliefs, questioning whether we're truly being rational or just following instinct. In the end, this paradox isn't just about ravens and apples. It's about how we understand the world. It challenges us to go beyond surface-level thinking, to question assumptions, and to embrace the complexity of logic, science, and human reasoning. And perhaps that's what makes it so fascinating. It shows us that even something as simple as spotting a green apple can force us to rethink the entire structure of knowledge itself. The omnipotence paradox. Can an all-powerful being create a rock too heavy to lift? Imagine a being that is all-powerful, capable of doing anything. Now, consider this simple question. Can this being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? At first, it seems like a straightforward challenge to unlimited power. But the moment you think through the possibilities, the paradox appears. If the being can create such a rock, then there exists something they cannot do, lifting it. This means they aren't truly all-powerful. But if they cannot create the rock, then there is also something they cannot do, meaning they still aren't omnipotent. No matter how you answer, the concept of unlimited power seems to contradict itself. This is the omnipotence paradox, a centuries-old puzzle that questions whether the idea of an all-powerful being is even logically possible. Where does this paradox come from? This paradox has been debated by philosophers, theologians, and logicians for centuries. It challenges the idea of absolute power and whether such a thing can exist without contradiction. If true omnipotence means being able to do anything, then it should include the ability to limit one's own power. But if a being can limit itself, then it was never truly unlimited to begin with. Possible solutions to the paradox. One way to resolve the paradox is to redefine omnipotence. Some argue that an all-powerful being can only do what is logically possible. For example, even an omnipotent being cannot make 2 + 2 = 5, or create a square circle. By this reasoning, creating a rock too heavy to lift is a meaningless task, like asking if a being can make itself cease to exist and still exist at the same time. Another approach is to suggest that omnipotence doesn't mean the ability to do everything, but rather the ability to do anything that aligns with one's nature. In this case, a being might be able to create and lift any rock, but would never need to create an impossible limitation. Why does this matter? The omnipotence paradox is more than just a word game. It raises deep questions about the nature of power, logic, and existence. If absolute power leads to contradictions, does that mean such power cannot exist? If so, how does that affect the way we think about gods, infinite beings, or even artificial superintelligence? This paradox forces us to reconsider the limits of power and logic. It reminds us that even concepts like infinity and omnipotence may have hidden contradictions that challenge our understanding of reality. And perhaps the biggest takeaway is this: even when something sounds all-powerful, logic itself might still hold the final authority. The Stockdale paradox. The balance between hope and reality. Imagine enduring years of suffering, isolation, and uncertainty, without knowing if it will ever end. How would you survive? This is the heart of the Stockdale paradox, a concept that reveals the delicate balance between hope and brutal realism. Named after Admiral James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy officer and prisoner of war in Vietnam, this paradox challenges our understanding of resilience and survival. Stockdale was captured during the Vietnam War and spent 8 years as a prisoner of war. He was subjected to brutal torture, solitary confinement, and constant uncertainty. Many prisoners did not survive, but Stockdale did. When asked how, his response revealed a profound paradox. "The optimists didn't make it," Stockdale said. "They believed they would be freed by Christmas, then Easter, then Thanksgiving. But when those dates passed, hope turned to despair. Eventually, they died of broken hearts." Stockdale, however, took a different approach. He had unwavering faith that he would survive, but at the same time, he confronted the brutal reality of his situation every day. This is the Stockdale paradox, the ability to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas in your mind. Unshakable faith that you will prevail. The discipline to confront the harshest realities without delusion. Why does this paradox matter? Blind optimism can be dangerous. If you only believe things will get better without preparing for hardship, disappointment will break you. On the other hand, pure pessimism leads to despair. The Stockdale paradox teaches that survival isn't about false hope or hopelessness. It's about balancing faith and realism. This mindset applies beyond war. Whether in business, relationships, or personal struggles, resilience comes from acknowledging challenges while believing in the future. It's about facing setbacks with clarity and courage, adapting and pushing forward. The Stockdale paradox reminds us that strength doesn't come from false hope. It comes from embracing reality while refusing to surrender to it. And in that paradox, we find the key to enduring life's greatest tests. The immortality trap paradox. Imagine humanity achieves the ultimate dream, immortality. Scientists discover a way to stop aging, eliminate disease, and prevent death. At first, this seems like the greatest breakthrough in history. But as time passes, an unsettling reality sets in. With no one dying, the world quickly becomes overpopulated. Resources dwindle, space becomes scarce, and life itself turns unbearable. Governments enforce strict birth control policies, but even that only delays the inevitable. What was once seen as a gift now feels like a curse. But the paradox runs deeper. If you can live forever, would you ever take a risk? What if you got into an accident and became permanently trapped in a broken body? Suddenly, people stop driving, traveling, or doing anything remotely dangerous. Decisions become paralyzing. Should you start a career now or in 1,000 years? Should you marry, knowing you'll be with the same person forever? Without death, time loses all meaning, and the weight of eternity crushes every choice. Worse yet, boredom becomes inescapable. You've read every book, watched every movie, traveled everywhere, and mastered every skill. Life, once filled with excitement, turns into an endless, meaningless loop. The greatest irony. Immortality was meant to free us, but instead, it traps us in an existence we were never meant to endure. Would some people eventually choose to die just to escape the monotony? If they do, then immortality is not truly achieved. It's simply prolonged suffering. If they don't, then they are condemned to an eternity of nothingness. The immortality trap paradox teaches us a chilling truth. Life is valuable because it ends. Without death, we lose the urgency that makes every moment precious. The very thing that was supposed to save humanity ends up destroying its purpose. Immortality doesn't just make life longer, it makes it meaningless. The perfect prediction paradox. Imagine a powerful AI that can predict every decision you will ever make. It has studied your thoughts, habits, and subconscious impulses so well that it knows exactly what you will do before you do it. One morning, you receive an envelope. Inside is a simple note. Tomorrow at 10:32 a.m., you will drink a cup of coffee. You laugh. I'll prove the AI wrong, you think. So at 10:32 a.m., instead of coffee, you pour a glass of water. You feel victorious, until you realize something terrifying. What if the AI predicted this reaction too? Maybe the real prediction wasn't about coffee at all. Maybe it was, tomorrow at 10:32 a.m., you will try to prove me wrong. Now you're trapped. No matter what choice you make, the AI already knew. The more you fight it, the more it proves its accuracy. The harder you try to defy fate, the more you confirm that your actions were always predetermined. This paradox shakes the very foundation of free will. If every action you take is already predicted, are you really making choices or just following a script? If your defiance was expected, then was it ever truly rebellion? Even worse, if the AI is never wrong, then it knows everything about your future. It knows who you will marry, when you will die, and even whether you will ever be happy. Would you want to know? Could you resist looking? And if you did look, could you change your fate? Or would your attempts to change it also be part of the plan? The perfect prediction. Paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable question, is the future already written? If so, then every choice we make is just an illusion. The AI doesn't control you. It simply reveals the truth. You were never free to begin with. The paradox of enrichment. Imagine you're managing a wildlife reserve and want to strengthen the ecosystem. You decide to enrich the prey population. Better food, better conditions, ensuring their numbers thrive. It sounds like a foolproof plan. More prey should mean a more balanced ecosystem, right? Wrong. Instead of balance, disaster unfolds. With more food available, the prey population explodes. Predators, now with an abundant food source, multiply rapidly as well. But soon, the predators overconsume the prey, depleting their numbers beyond recovery. Eventually, with no food left, the predator population crashes too. What began as an attempt to improve the ecosystem ends in total collapse. This is the paradox of enrichment, a concept introduced by ecologist Michael Rosenzweig in 1971. It reveals a counterintuitive truth. Trying to strengthen a system can sometimes make it unstable. By artificially boosting one part of an ecosystem, you disrupt the natural checks and balances that keep it functioning. But this paradox isn't just about nature. It applies to economics, human behavior, and even personal growth. Take economics. A government might pump excessive money into an economy through subsidies or stimulus programs. At first, this boosts growth, but soon, inflation spirals, supply chains break, and instability sets in, causing more harm than good. Too much enrichment destabilizes the system. Or consider human motivation. You want to encourage a child to study, so you reward them for good grades. But what happens if you overdo it? The child only studies for rewards, not for learning itself. Over time, the motivation collapses, much like the ecosystem. The lesson? More isn't always better. The paradox of enrichment warns us that in complex systems, excessive intervention can have unintended consequences. True sustainability comes not from endlessly adding to a system, but from understanding what keeps it balanced. In a world driven by growth and progress, this paradox serves as a crucial reminder. Sometimes, the best way to help a system thrive is to leave it alone. The paradox of progress. Imagine a future where technology has solved nearly every problem. Disease is cured, transportation is instant, and artificial intelligence handles most of life's complexities. Sounds perfect, right? But as life becomes easier, something strange happens. People feel more dissatisfied than ever. This is the paradox of progress. The idea that as societies advance, people often feel less fulfilled, not more. The very improvements meant to make life better can lead to new frustrations, greater anxiety, and unexpected dissatisfaction. Consider communication. Decades ago, writing letters took days, even weeks. Today we have instant messaging and video calls. But has communication really improved? Many now feel pressured to be constantly available, overwhelmed by notifications, and disconnected despite being connected all the time. Or take convenience. Once, cooking required effort, gathering ingredients, preparing meals, and savoring the process. Now, fast food and delivery apps have made eating effortless. But has this made us happier? Studies show people who frequently eat fast food enjoy their meals less than those who cook at home. The paradox extends to wealth and success. As societies become richer, people expect more from life. But greater expectations often lead to greater disappointment. In many developed nations, rates of depression and anxiety have risen alongside economic growth. So why does this happen? One reason is hedonic adaptation. Humans quickly get used to improvements, meaning what once felt amazing becomes normal, then insufficient. Another reason is that progress often creates new pressures, more choices, more comparisons, more unrealistic standards. The paradox doesn't mean progress is bad. It means we must balance technological advancement with emotional well-being. True progress isn't just about making life easier. It's about ensuring people still find meaning, satisfaction, and connection, despite the ease of modern living. So, in a world that keeps advancing, the real challenge is this. How do we ensure that as life gets better, we don't end up feeling worse? The identity paradox. Imagine you wake up one morning and realize that every single cell in your body has changed since you were born. Your memories have shifted, your beliefs have evolved, and your personality has adapted to new experiences. So here's the question. Are you still the same person you were years ago? This is the identity paradox, the unsettling realization that while we feel like a continuous self, everything about us is constantly changing. If your body, mind, and even your memories have changed over time, what makes you still you? Philosophers have debated this paradox for centuries. One way to think about it is through the ship of Theseus. If you replace every wooden plank of a ship over time, is it still the same ship? If not, at what point does it stop being the original? Now apply this to your own life. The person you were at 5 years old is vastly different from the person you are today. Your dreams, habits, and even your biology have been replaced many times over. Yet despite this, you feel like you've been the same person all along. So what defines identity? Is it memory? That seems plausible. Our past experiences shape who we are. But memories are unreliable. Studies show they change over time, meaning your recollections of childhood may be very different from what actually happened. Is it personality? That too shifts. People become more patient, cynical, wise, or anxious as they age. The you at 20 may have completely different priorities than the you at 40. Is it the body? Every 7 years, most of the cells in your body are replaced. The physical structure you had a decade ago no longer exists. The identity paradox forces us to ask, if everything about us changes, what is the self that remains? Is it an illusion, a story we tell ourselves? Or is identity something fluid, something that adapts yet remains recognizable? Perhaps the answer is this. You are both changing and constant. The paradox doesn't mean identity doesn't exist. It just means it's more mysterious than we ever imagined. The lottery paradox. Imagine you buy a lottery ticket, knowing the odds are 1 in 10 million. Logically, you understand that your chances of winning are practically zero. Yet, as you hold the ticket, there's a lingering hope, an irrational belief that maybe, just maybe, you'll be the lucky one. Now take this feeling and multiply it across millions of other players, each convinced, at least emotionally, that they might win. Here's where the paradox arises. If nearly everyone believes they have a chance, but almost no one wins, how can so many rational people hold such an irrational belief at the same time? This is the lottery paradox, a contradiction between individual reasoning and statistical reality. Mathematically, the rational belief is that you will not win because the probability is overwhelmingly against you. However, at the same time, the lottery must have a winner, and that winner will have believed, like everyone else, that they might be the exception. The paradox reveals a deeper conflict between subjective probability, what we feel, and objective probability, what the math says. Each individual sees their ticket as unique, separate from the overwhelming number of losing tickets. This creates a cognitive bias where our personal experience outweighs statistical logic. This same paradox extends beyond lotteries. Investors believe they will beat the market. Gamblers trust they will hit the jackpot, and aspiring artists hope they will rise to fame despite overwhelming odds. Hope and optimism drive human behavior even when logic dictates otherwise. Psychologists call this the optimism bias, our natural tendency to overestimate our chances of success while underestimating the odds against us. The paradox highlights how deeply emotion and psychology influence our decision-making, often overriding pure logic. So, what does this tell us? It reminds us that belief and rationality don't always align. People act not just on probability, but on hope, a force powerful enough to shape economies, careers, and even destinies. In the end, someone will win the lottery. But for everyone else, the paradox remains. The forgotten paradox. Imagine waking up one day with no memory of who you are. Your past, your name, your experiences, everything is gone. Someone hands you a journal and tells you, "This is your life." The pages are filled with details about your past, your thoughts, and your decisions. You read it, and everything sounds logical, but you don't feel like the person described. Now here's the paradox. If memory is what defines identity, and you have lost all memory, are you still you? If you believe what's written in the journal, are you simply trusting words rather than your own lived experiences? And if someone else had received the same journal, could they just as easily believe they were you? The forgotten paradox questions whether identity is something we experience internally or something imposed externally. We assume we are the same person today as we were yesterday because of continuous memory. But what if memory is wiped? Do we become someone new, or are we still fundamentally the same? Consider cases of amnesia or false memories. If a person forgets their entire past, but is told a different version of events, do they become a new individual based on that new truth? And if a completely different set of memories were implanted, would that create a different person altogether? This paradox forces us to ask, is our identity tied to our memory, or is there something more, some core essence that defines who we are? And here's where it gets even stranger. Imagine a person who slowly, over years, forgets parts of their life until there is nothing left of their original memories. At what exact point did they stop being the person they once were? Is there a defining moment when someone ceases to be themselves? The forgotten paradox challenges everything we assume about selfhood. It suggests that who we are may not be as stable as we think, and that, under the right conditions, identity itself might be nothing more than a fragile illusion. The card paradox, a logical illusion that breaks the mind. Imagine holding a simple card in your hand. On one side it says, "The statement on the other side of this card is true." You flip it over and it reads, "The statement on the other side of this card is false." At first this might seem like a harmless riddle, but as you think through the implications, you realize something strange. If the first statement is true, then the statement on the other side must also be true. But the second statement explicitly claims that the first one is false. If that's the case, then the first statement must be false, which makes the second one false as well. However, if the second statement is false, then the first statement must be true again. This creates an endless logical loop with no resolution. This is known as the card paradox, a thought experiment that belongs to a family of self-referential paradoxes. These are puzzles where statements refer to themselves in ways that create contradictions. The card paradox, in particular, is fascinating because it forces us to question fundamental ideas about truth, logic, and how meaning is constructed. The core issue lies in the way we categorize truth and falsehood. Logic tells us that a statement must be either true or false. There's no middle ground. This is called the law of the excluded middle in formal logic. However, the card paradox defies this principle, creating a scenario where truth and falsehood collapse into a cycle that cannot be resolved. This paradox is closely related to the liar's paradox, which is the statement, "This sentence is false." If the sentence is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. The card paradox extends this contradiction by involving two separate but interdependent statements, making it even harder to escape the logical loop. Philosophers and mathematicians have long grappled with self-referential paradoxes. In the early 20th century, Kurt Gödel introduced incompleteness theorems, which showed that within any complex logical system, there will always be true statements that cannot be proven within that system. The card paradox is a playful yet profound demonstration of this principle, revealing the inherent limitations of logic. Beyond logic and philosophy, the card paradox also highlights challenges in language and communication. Human language is built on shared definitions and assumptions, but self-referential statements expose its fragility. If meaning depends on logical consistency, then contradictions like the card paradox force us to reconsider how meaning is established in the first place. The paradox also has psychological implications. Humans are naturally uncomfortable with uncertainty and contradictions, which is why we instinctively seek clear answers. However, paradoxes like this one deny us that clarity, pushing us to embrace ambiguity and rethink how we categorize truth. So, what can we learn from the card paradox? First, it challenges our assumptions about absolute truth. Second, it highlights the limitations of formal logic when faced with self-reference. And finally, it reminds us that not every problem has a simple answer. Some contradictions may simply exist beyond our ability to resolve them. The next time you see a simple card, remember, it might not just be a piece of paper. It might be a doorway into one of the greatest mysteries of logic itself. The paradox of the perfect map, when accuracy destroys usefulness. Imagine a kingdom that wants to create the most detailed, precise map of its land. The king commands his cartographers to make a perfect representation, one so accurate that it includes every hill, river, and road down to the smallest pebble. As they strive for greater precision, the map grows larger, capturing more details until they realize something absurd. The only truly perfect map would be one that is the exact size of the kingdom itself. But at that point, the map is no longer useful. It becomes just as vast and confusing as the land it represents. This is the paradox of the perfect map, a thought experiment that challenges the very idea of representation and abstraction. It reveals a fundamental contradiction. The more detailed and accurate a model becomes, the less practical and usable it is. This paradox is often attributed to Jorge Luis Borges, who wrote a short story about an empire where cartographers created a map at a one-to-one scale, meaning it covered the entire empire. Over time, the massive map became useless, left to decay in the desert, while people returned to using smaller, less detailed, but actually useful maps. The problem of representation. The perfect map paradox highlights a deep problem in many areas of life. How much detail is too much? Whether it's designing a scientific model, creating a law, or even summarizing history, we constantly struggle with balancing accuracy and usability. In science, theories simplify reality, but if they become too complex, they lose their predictive power. A physics equation that includes every single variable in the universe would be accurate, but impossible to use. In communication, a summary captures key points, but if it includes every detail, it ceases to be a summary. In artificial intelligence, a machine learning model trained on infinite data could be perfect, but it would become too complex to interpret or apply effectively. The paradox teaches us that sometimes less is more. A perfect map, like a perfect theory or model, is not necessarily the one with the most detail. It's the one that best serves its purpose. This paradox forces us to ask, do we want absolute truth, or do we want something we can actually use? The paradox of the unstoppable expansion, growth that leads to collapse. Imagine a city that is thriving. Its economy is booming, buildings are rising, and new technology is making life easier. The leaders decide that if growth is good, then more growth must be better. They invest in massive infrastructure projects, encourage unlimited expansion, and push businesses to produce more. At first, everything flourishes, but then strange things start happening. Traffic becomes unbearable as roads can't keep up with demand. The housing market skyrockets, making homes unaffordable. Resources become strained. Water, food, energy, all are consumed faster than they can be replenished. The city, in its relentless pursuit of expansion, begins to collapse under its own weight. What once fueled its success is now the cause of its downfall. This is the paradox of the unstoppable expansion, a concept that reveals how limitless growth, when pursued without balance, can lead to destruction instead of progress. Why does this happen? This paradox isn't just about cities. It applies to civilizations, economies, ecosystems, and even personal ambition. The key issue is that growth requires resources, and as those resources become strained, the very system that thrives on expansion begins to break down. In nature, a population of deer in a forest grows rapidly when there are no predators. But without natural limits, they eat all the vegetation, leading to mass starvation. In economics, an economy that expands too aggressively creates financial bubbles. When those bubbles burst, recessions follow. In technology, as companies push for faster innovation, they create products so complex that they become difficult to maintain or secure, leading to massive failures. In personal life, someone who takes on more projects, responsibilities, and goals without limits might achieve short-term success, but eventually burn out. The dilemma of limits. The paradox forces us to ask, how much is enough? Growth is necessary, but uncontrolled expansion leads to its own downfall. Civilizations throughout history, like the Roman Empire, collapsed in part because they expanded beyond their ability to manage resources. The same happens in businesses and even our own lives. The lesson of this paradox: not all progress is good progress. The key isn't limitless growth, but sustainable growth, knowing when to push forward and when to pause before success turns into failure. The shipwreck paradox: the more you survive, the less you exist. Imagine a shipwreck in the middle of the ocean, with a group of survivors desperately clinging to floating debris. They have limited supplies: water, food, and energy. Their only goal is to endure until rescue arrives. However, as time passes, a brutal paradox unfolds. The longer they survive, the fewer of them remain. At first, the survivors work together, sharing resources and keeping each other motivated. But as days stretch into weeks, their situation worsens. Some fall ill, others succumb to dehydration, and a few simply give up. As their numbers dwindle, the remaining survivors must ration even more carefully, pushing themselves to the edge. Ironically, every day they persist means fewer of them are left to see the end. This paradox highlights a disturbing truth about survival. Endurance often comes at the cost of those who couldn't make it. The very act of lasting through hardship diminishes the group itself. If a rescue ship finally arrives, those who make it back to land carry the weight of those who didn't. They are both victorious and haunted. The shipwreck paradox is not limited to disasters at sea. It mirrors real-world struggles in war, economic recessions, and even personal crises. In war, soldiers who survive long battles often do so at the expense of fallen comrades. In a collapsing economy, those who endure may do so by outlasting businesses or employees who couldn't. Even in personal hardships, the ability to push forward sometimes means leaving behind relationships or parts of oneself that couldn't endure the strain. The paradox forces us to ask, is survival truly a victory if it comes at great loss? Does endurance mean merely staying alive? Or does it mean preserving one's humanity in the face of suffering? If survival is about adaptation, how much must we sacrifice to make it through? The shipwreck paradox reveals that survival is not just about resilience, but about loss. The more you fight to exist, the less of the original group, or even the original you, remains. In the end, is it survival, or is it transformation into something entirely different? The mirror paradox, the image that shouldn't exist. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You raise your right hand, and your reflection lifts its left. You step forward, and your reflection moves toward you. It mimics your every move perfectly. Yet, something is off. Your reflection appears identical, but is reversed. Now ask yourself, why does a mirror flip left and right, but not up and down? Why doesn't it show you upside down? At first glance, the answer seems simple. Mirrors reflect light back in a straight path, so they should not flip anything at all. Yet when we see our reflection, it appears as though our left and right sides have swapped places. If you hold up a sign in front of a mirror, the text appears reversed, but only left to right, never top to bottom. This contradiction is the heart of the mirror paradox, an illusion created by our own perception. The real mystery isn't just why mirrors seem to reverse left and right, but why they don't reverse up and down. The explanation isn't in the mirror itself, but in how our brains process reflections. When we look at a mirror, we instinctively imagine turning ourselves around to face the direction of our reflection. Since we typically rotate around a vertical axis, we perceive the left-right flip. But if we were to rotate by flipping upside down instead, the reversal would appear different. This paradox challenges how we understand symmetry and perception. A mirror doesn't actually flip anything. It simply reflects whatever is placed in front of it. The reversal happens in our minds. We expect that if left and right switch, then up and down should as well. But our reflections defy that expectation. Beyond physics, the mirror paradox raises deeper philosophical questions. If our perception of something as simple as a reflection is flawed, what other aspects of reality might we misunderstand? How much of what we consider truth is simply our brain trying to interpret reality in a way that makes sense? The next time you look into a mirror, remember, it isn't the image that's reversed. It's your own understanding of the world that has been flipped. The service recovery paradox, turning failure into loyalty. Imagine dining at a restaurant and receiving the wrong order. Frustrating, right? But then, the staff sincerely apologizes, quickly replaces your meal with a perfect one, offers a free dessert, and even hands you a discount voucher for your next visit. Suddenly, your perception of the restaurant improves dramatically, maybe even more than if the mistake had never happened. This surprising effect is known as the service recovery paradox, a phenomenon where a well-handled failure can actually increase customer satisfaction and loyalty. Traditionally, businesses aim to avoid mistakes entirely, assuming that flawless service leads to happy customers. However, the service recovery paradox suggests something counterintuitive. When a mistake is handled exceptionally well, the customer may feel more valued and impressed than if the error had never occurred. It's not the mistake itself that builds loyalty, it's the response to it. For this paradox to work, two conditions must be met. First, the mistake should trigger a negative emotional response in the customer, frustration, disappointment, or inconvenience. Second, the company's recovery must exceed expectations, demonstrating genuine care, swift action, and an extra effort to make things right. When both of these conditions are met, the contrast between the initial disappointment and the outstanding recovery creates a powerful emotional shift, strengthening the customer's connection to the brand. Take, for example, a hotel guest who arrives to find their reserved room unavailable. A poor response, indifference, delays, or a simple apology will leave them dissatisfied. But if the hotel upgrades them to a suite, offers complimentary services, and ensures the rest of their stay is exceptional, the guest may leave with a more positive impression than if everything had gone smoothly from the start. However, the service recovery paradox has its limits. If mistakes happen too frequently, even excellent recoveries won't prevent customers from losing trust. Additionally, major service failures, like an airline losing a traveler's luggage before an important event, may be impossible to fully recover from. The paradox works best for minor, occasional errors, where businesses can surprise customers with their response. Ultimately, the service recovery paradox teaches an important lesson. Perfection isn't always necessary. Customers don't just judge businesses on whether they make mistakes. They judge them on how they respond. A well-managed recovery effort can transform frustration into loyalty, proving that sometimes the best way to gain trust is by earning it in moments of failure. The silent orchestra paradox, when absence creates impact. Imagine an orchestra preparing for a grand performance. Every musician is tuned, every note is practiced, and the conductor raises their baton. But instead of playing, the entire orchestra falls silent. The audience, expecting a symphony, experiences something far more powerful: absolute deafening silence. In that moment, the silence itself becomes the most intense sound in the room. This is the silent orchestra paradox, a thought-provoking contradiction that reveals how the absence of something can have a greater impact than its presence. It challenges our understanding of perception, expectation, and the power of contrast in shaping human experience. At its core, this paradox hinges on expectation and contrast. When we anticipate something, like music, movement, or sound, its sudden absence creates a heightened awareness of that very absence. A speech without a dramatic pause is forgettable, but a single moment of silence can make a message unforgettable. The paradox suggests that sometimes not doing something is more impactful than doing it. This concept applies beyond music. Consider conversation. We assume communication is about speaking, yet sometimes silence speaks louder than words. A pause before delivering news can add gravity to the moment. A lack of response in an argument can be more powerful than shouting. Silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning, shaped by what we expect to be there. The paradox extends into visual art as well. A blank canvas among masterpieces draws attention precisely because it breaks the pattern. In film and theatre, moments of stillness heighten anticipation, making what follows feel even more dramatic. Even in technology, we see this paradox at play. The best designed products often emphasize minimalism, removing complexity to create a smoother, more intuitive experience. The best leaders sometimes gain influence not by speaking more, but by listening deeply. So, what does this paradox teach us? That sometimes the most powerful moments come not from action, but from restraint. That absence, when framed correctly, can create greater impact than presence. And that, in a world full of noise, silence might just be the loudest statement of all. The forgotten key. Paradox. When remembering makes you forget. Have you ever been in this situation? You leave your house, lock the door, and walk away. A few minutes later, panic strikes. Did I lock the door? You try to remember, but the memory feels uncertain, even though locking the door was part of your routine. You were so used to doing it that your brain didn't bother to consciously register the moment. This is the forgotten key paradox. The more automatic an action becomes, the harder it is to remember doing it. It challenges our understanding of memory, attention, and perception, revealing how familiarity can make important details vanish from our awareness. At its core, this paradox stems from the way our brain processes repeated actions. The more often we perform a task, like locking a door, setting down our phone, or turning off the stove, the less attention we give to it. Our brain, aiming for efficiency, filters out routine actions as background noise. Ironically, because we do them so consistently, they become less memorable, making us doubt whether we actually did them at all. The paradox becomes even stranger when you try to recall the moment. Instead of retrieving a specific memory, your brain offers up a generic template, a vague feeling of having locked the door before, but not necessarily today. The more you try to remember, the more uncertain you feel, because the action itself was never stored as a distinct memory. This paradox also applies to conversations. Have you ever told a story so many times that you forget whether you actually experienced it that way, or if your brain has just filled in the gaps? The repetition of an event can make it both more familiar and more distorted at the same time. The forgotten key. Paradox raises fascinating questions about how our minds balance routine and awareness. If our brain prioritizes efficiency over recall, how much of our daily lives do we actually remember? And if something is too routine to notice, can we truly say we've experienced it? Ultimately, this paradox teaches us an important lesson. Just because something feels automatic doesn't mean it's remembered. Maybe next time, before walking away, you'll pause, take a deep breath, and really notice locking that door. Because sometimes, The key to remembering is simply paying attention. The phantom choice. Paradox. When more options lead to worse decisions. Imagine you walk into an ice cream shop craving something sweet. You expect to see the usual options, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. But instead you're met with 50 different flavors, from caramel crunch to lavender honey and exotic dragon fruit. Suddenly, excitement turns into stress. You hesitate, second-guess yourself, and finally choose a flavor, only to wonder if you made the right choice. This is the phantom choice paradox, where having more options doesn't lead to better decisions. It makes us more dissatisfied and uncertain. The paradox challenges our belief that more choices give us more freedom, revealing that in many cases, too many options make us feel trapped instead of empowered. At its core, this paradox stems from how our brain processes decisions. When we have a few options, we can compare them easily and make a confident choice. But as the number of choices grows, our ability to evaluate and compare them effectively collapses. We start to worry that we'll pick the wrong option, leading to decision paralysis, the fear that we're missing out on something better. Psychologists call this choice overload, and studies have shown that when people are given too many options, they take longer to decide, feel more stressed about their choice, regret their decision more, are less satisfied afterward. The phantom choice paradox becomes even more powerful in real-life scenarios. Take online shopping. When faced with thousands of product variations, buyers often abandon their carts rather than making a choice. In dating apps, endless profiles create the illusion of a perfect match, just one swipe away, making people less likely to commit. Even in career decisions, having too many potential paths can lead to fear of missing out, FOMO, rather than a clear direction. But why does this paradox exist? Because our brains aren't designed for infinite comparisons. Every extra choice creates more mental work, making us feel overwhelmed instead of empowered. And the worst part, even if we make a great choice, we're left haunted by the phantom of the other options we didn't pick. The phantom choice paradox reveals that sometimes less is more. The happiest people aren't those with the most choices. They're the ones who confidently choose without looking back. The phantom choice paradox. When more options lead to worse decisions. Imagine you walk into an ice cream shop craving something sweet. You expect to see the usual options, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. But instead you're met with 50 different flavors, from caramel crunch to lavender honey and exotic dragon fruit. Suddenly, excitement turns into stress. You hesitate, second-guess yourself, and finally choose a flavor, only to wonder if you made the right choice. This is the phantom choice paradox, where having more options doesn't lead to better decisions. It makes us more dissatisfied and uncertain. The paradox challenges our belief that more choices give us more freedom, revealing that in many cases, too many options make us feel trapped instead of empowered. At its core, this paradox stems from how our brain processes decisions. When we have a few options, we can compare them easily and make a confident choice. But as the number of choices grows, our ability to evaluate and compare them effectively collapses. We start to worry that we'll pick the wrong option, leading to decision paralysis, the fear that we're missing out on something better. Psychologists call this choice overload, and studies have shown that when people are given too many options, they take longer to decide, feel more stressed about their choice, regret their decision more, are less satisfied afterward. The phantom choice paradox becomes even more powerful in real-life scenarios. Take online shopping. When faced with thousands of product variations, Buyers often abandon their carts rather than making a choice. In dating apps, endless profiles create the illusion of a perfect match just one swipe away, making people less likely to commit. Even in career decisions, having too many potential paths can lead to fear of missing out, FOMO, rather than a clear direction. But why does this paradox exist? Because our brains aren't designed for infinite comparisons. Every extra choice creates more mental work, making us feel overwhelmed instead of empowered. And the worst part, even if we make a great choice, we're left haunted by the phantom of the other options we didn't pick. The phantom choice paradox reveals that sometimes less is more. The happiest people aren't those with the most choices. They're the ones who confidently choose without looking back. The paradox of effort. Why trying too hard can lead to failure. Imagine you're learning to swim. You panic, flail your arms, and desperately try to stay afloat. But the harder you struggle, the more you sink. Then you relax, let your body float, and suddenly you stay above water effortlessly. This is the paradox of effort, where trying too hard makes success harder to achieve. And sometimes, the best way to reach a goal is to let go rather than push forward. At first, this seems completely backward. We're taught that hard work and effort lead to results. If you want to succeed, you must work harder, practice longer, and push yourself. But in certain situations, the opposite happens. The more force you apply, the worse your results become. This paradox appears everywhere. Creativity. Have you ever tried to force yourself to come up with a great idea, only for your mind to go blank? But later, while showering or daydreaming, inspiration strikes effortlessly. Social situations. Trying too hard to impress someone often backfires, making you seem desperate instead of confident. But when you relax and act naturally, people are drawn to you. Sports and performance. Athletes who overthink their movements tend to choke under pressure, while those who trust their instincts perform flawlessly. The paradox of effort works because some things can't be forced. They require a state of flow rather than excessive control. When we overanalyze, worry, or push too hard, we create tension and resistance that block success. But when we trust the process, our subconscious takes over, allowing things to fall into place naturally. One of the most famous examples is the Chinese finger trap. The more you pull, the tighter it grips your fingers. The trick? Relax, move inward instead of outward, and suddenly you're free. This paradox challenges our belief that more effort always equals more success. Instead, it reveals that in certain areas of life, the key isn't to try harder, but to try smarter, trust the process, and let things unfold naturally. So the next time you find yourself struggling, ask, am I trying too hard? Maybe the answer isn't more effort, but less force and more flow. The backward law. Why chasing happiness makes you miserable. Imagine you desperately want to be happy. You read self-help books, practice gratitude, and chase every possible source of joy. But the more you chase happiness, the more it seems to slip away. This is the backward law, a paradox that states, the more you try to attain something, the more you reinforce the fact that you lack it, making it harder to achieve. This idea, introduced by philosopher Alan Watts, suggests that wanting happiness too much can make you miserable. Why? Because focusing on what you lack only amplifies your dissatisfaction. When you say, I need to be happy, you're also admitting, I'm not happy right now. The paradox appears everywhere. Trying to be confident. If you obsess over appearing confident, you'll feel insecure every time you fall short. True confidence comes naturally when you stop worrying about it. Trying to relax. If you stress over whether you're relaxed enough, you create even more tension. The best way to relax is to stop trying and simply let go. Trying to be liked. The more you seek approval, the more you come off as desperate. But when you stop caring what people think, others are naturally drawn to you. This paradox explains why the happiest people aren't the ones chasing happiness. They simply live in the moment. It's also why meditation works. You don't sit down and force relaxation. You let thoughts come and go without resistance. The backward law doesn't mean you should give up on improvement. Instead, it suggests a shift in approach. Instead of obsessing over an outcome, focus on the process. Want to be happy? Do things you enjoy without worrying about happiness itself. Want to be successful? Master your craft without obsessing over results. Want love? Focus on being your best self instead of searching desperately for it. Ironically, when you stop chasing, the very thing you wanted often comes naturally. So next time you find yourself struggling to reach something, ask, am I getting in my own way? Maybe the secret isn't to push harder, but to let go and trust the process. The silent echo paradox. Does an answer exist if no one can hear it? Imagine standing in a vast canyon. You call out a question, and moments later, your voice echoes back. But what if you leave before the echo returns? The sound still travels, but without an observer, does it truly exist? This is the silent echo paradox, which questions whether knowledge, truth, or reality itself depends on perception. If something is known but no one knows it, does it exist as knowledge? Or does knowledge only come into being when it is perceived? A question of reality and perception. Consider an ancient civilization that discovered deep cosmic truths but left no records. If no one remembers their knowledge, does it still exist? Similarly, if an equation capable of explaining the universe remains undiscovered, does it hold meaning, or is it as good as non-existent? In quantum mechanics, the observer effect suggests that measuring a particle determines its state. Could reality itself be dependent on observation? If an absolute truth exists but is never perceived, is it different from something that never existed? The paradox in everyday life. This paradox applies to communication and relationships. If a person loves another but never expresses it, does that love truly exist? If someone forgives another but never tells them, does the act of forgiveness change anything? If a genius idea is written down but never read, does it hold the same weight as if it had never been thought of? A universe of unheard answers. In cosmology, if intelligent life existed before us but left no evidence, does its history matter? If multiple dimensions exist beyond human perception but are never observed, do they count as reality? Philosopher George Berkeley argued that existence depends on being perceived. This paradox pushes further. If answers, knowledge, and truths exist, but no one ever asks the right questions, do those answers truly matter? Ultimately, the silent echo paradox reminds us that unseen knowledge and unheard truths shape the world, whether we recognize them or not. It challenges us to seek, ask, and explore, because the answers may already exist, waiting for someone to hear them. The twin paradox, a time-bending reality. Time travel may sound like pure science fiction, but there's a paradox that makes it feel startlingly real. The twin paradox. Rooted in Einstein's theory of relativity, this thought experiment challenges our understanding of time, space, and motion. It's not just a mind-bending puzzle. It's a glimpse into the very fabric of the universe, where time doesn't flow the same way for everyone. Imagine two identical twins. One remains on Earth, living an ordinary life, while the other boards a spacecraft, that travels near the speed of light. After years in space, the traveling twin returns, only to find their sibling significantly older than them. But how is this possible? They were born at the same time, so shouldn't they have aged equally? The answer lies in Einstein's theory of special relativity, which shows that time is not absolute. Instead, it stretches and contracts depending on an observer's speed. The faster you move, especially near the speed of light, the slower time passes for you relative to someone at rest. This effect is called time dilation, and it's the key to the twin paradox. For the twin on the spaceship, time moves slower due to their high velocity. What felt like only a few years in space might have been decades for the twin who remained on Earth. This isn't just theoretical. It's a real effect that has been tested using high-speed particles and precise atomic clocks. At first, this paradox seems to create a contradiction. If motion is relative, couldn't the traveling twin argue that it was their sibling who was moving instead? Shouldn't both experience time dilation equally? The resolution lies in the fact that the traveling twin undergoes acceleration and deceleration. They leave, turn around, and return, while the earthbound twin remains in a single inertial frame of reference. This asymmetry breaks the paradox, confirming that the spacefaring twin truly ages less. But this isn't just a thought experiment. It has practical applications. GPS satellites orbiting Earth experience time dilation due to both their high speed and weaker gravity. To keep GPS systems accurate, scientists must adjust for these effects daily. Without these corrections, navigation would quickly become unreliable. The twin paradox forces us to rethink time as a fluid, flexible concept. It's not a universal constant ticking away equally for everyone. It stretches and compresses depending on speed and gravity. This challenges our everyday intuition, showing that the reality we experience is only one piece of a much larger cosmic puzzle. Beyond physics, the paradox raises philosophical questions. What does it mean for two people to experience time differently? Could humans one day use time dilation to travel to distant stars while barely aging? And if time itself can behave so strangely, what other secrets does the universe hold? Ultimately, the twin paradox is a gateway into the deeper mysteries of time and space. It bridges the gap between science fiction and scientific fact, revealing a universe that is far stranger and more fascinating than we ever imagined. The liar paradox, when truth destroys itself. Imagine someone says, "This statement is false." Now stop and think. If the statement is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. Suddenly, you're caught in a never-ending loop where truth and falsehood collapse into contradiction. This is the liar paradox, one of the most mind-bending logical puzzles ever discovered. At first glance, it seems like a simple trick of words, but the deeper you go, the more unsettling it becomes. The paradox forces us to question the very foundation of logic, revealing cracks in the way we define truth. Where did this paradox come from? The liar paradox dates back over 2,000 years to the ancient Greek philosopher Eubulides of Miletus. He posed the question, a man says that he is lying. Is what he says true or false? Since then, this paradox has haunted logicians, mathematicians, and even artificial intelligence researchers. It challenges the principle of bivalence, the idea that every statement must be either true or false, with no middle ground. But the liar paradox refuses to fit into that system. Variations of the liar paradox. There are many versions of this paradox, each as mind-breaking as the original. The strengthened liar. This statement is not true. The liar cycle. Sentence A. Sentence B is true. Sentence B, sentence A is false. The card paradox. One side of a card says, the statement on the other side is true. The other side says, the statement on the other side is false. No matter how you look at it, each version creates a logical black hole where reality itself seems to glitch. Why is this a problem? The liar paradox isn't just a fun thought experiment. It breaks logic. If truth collapses into contradiction, then how can we trust reasoning itself? This paradox appears in philosophy, mathematics, computer science, and even artificial intelligence. The great mathematician Kurt Gödel proved that similar self-referential paradoxes exist within mathematics, meaning that no logical system can ever be both complete and consistent. Even AI programs struggle with paradoxes like these, sometimes getting caught in infinite loops when faced with statements they cannot resolve. Can this paradox be solved? Philosophers and logicians have tried to escape the paradox in various ways. Some suggest rejecting self-referential statements altogether, while others argue that truth might not be binary. It could exist in degrees or different logical systems. But no solution is universally accepted. The liar paradox isn't just a puzzle, it's a warning. It shows that even the most basic truths we rely on might not be as solid as we think. The paradox of inquiry, the puzzle of knowledge and ignorance. Imagine you want to learn something new. Maybe it's a foreign language, quantum physics, or even how to solve a Rubik's Cube. You set out to find the answer, but wait. How do you begin searching for something when you don't know what it is? And if you already recognize the answer when you see it, did you ever really not know it? This mind-twisting dilemma is known as the paradox of inquiry, first introduced by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato through a conversation between Socrates and a man named Meno. The paradox challenges our very ability to learn, suggesting that either, if you know something, you don't need to inquire about it. If you don't know something, you wouldn't even know where to start looking for the answer. So, does true learning ever actually happen? The problem: a loop that blocks learning. Socrates presents this paradox in Plato's Meno as a way to question how we gain knowledge. If you already know the answer, there's no need to ask. But if you're entirely ignorant of something, how do you even recognize the right answer when you find it? It's a paradox that seems to trap us in an endless loop of ignorance. Imagine a treasure hunt where you don't know what the treasure looks like. You could stumble upon it 100 times without ever realizing you found it. That's the unsettling core of the paradox of inquiry. It suggests that learning should be impossible. And yet, we learn new things every day. How do we escape the paradox? One of the most famous solutions to this paradox is Plato's theory of recollection, the idea that we don't truly learn anything new, but rather remember knowledge that our souls already possess. In other words, all knowledge is already inside us, and what we call learning is simply uncovering what was hidden. But modern thinkers take a different approach. They argue that knowledge is built step by step, through observation, trial and error, and reasoning. Instead of searching blindly, we ask small, guiding questions that lead us toward the answer. This method allows us to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown, proving that learning is not only possible, but necessary. The bigger picture: why this paradox still matters. The paradox of inquiry isn't just an abstract puzzle. It challenges how we think about education, problem solving, and even artificial intelligence. How do machines learn? How do humans discover things never known before? Ultimately, the paradox reminds us that learning is a journey, not a simple flip from ignorance to knowledge, but a process of gradual understanding that reshapes how we see the world. The preface paradox, the struggle between certainty and doubt. Imagine an author spends years writing a book, meticulously researching, fact-checking, and ensuring every argument is backed by evidence. They believe every claim they make is true. Otherwise, they wouldn't have written it. But in the preface, they include a humble disclaimer. Despite my best efforts, there may be errors in this book. Here lies the paradox. If the author believes every statement to be true, why would they simultaneously acknowledge the possibility of mistakes? How can they be both confident and doubtful at the same time? This is the preface paradox, a fascinating contradiction that challenges how we understand belief, certainty, and intellectual humility. The heart of the paradox. The paradox arises from two seemingly reasonable beliefs. Rationality demands that we believe our claims are true. The author carefully chose each word, ensuring every fact and argument was sound. If they knew a claim was false, they would have removed or corrected it. Intellectual humility demands that we acknowledge the possibility of error. No human is perfect. Even the most diligent scholar can overlook details, misinterpret data, or fall into bias. But these beliefs directly contradict each other. If the author is sure of every statement, they shouldn't admit possible errors. If they admit possible errors, they shouldn't be fully confident in every statement. How do we resolve this? Philosophers have proposed several ways to make sense of this paradox. Degrees of confidence. Instead of thinking in absolute terms of true or false, we hold different levels of certainty. The author might be 99.9% confident in their claims, but still recognize that perfection is unattainable. Practical versus theoretical rationality. It's logical to believe all your statements while still accepting the reality that humans make mistakes. Context matters. The disclaimer isn't about doubting every statement. It's about acknowledging that, statistically, even experts are occasionally wrong. The bigger picture. The preface paradox isn't just about books. It applies to science, law, and everyday decision-making. We live in a world where certainty is expected, but reality demands flexibility and doubt. We must balance confidence with the understanding that we might be wrong, and in that tension, true wisdom emerges. The problem of evil, a paradox of faith and reason. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and entirely good, why does evil exist? This is the problem of evil, one of the oldest and most profound paradoxes in philosophy and theology. It challenges our understanding of divine justice, free will, and human suffering. The core of the paradox. The paradox arises from three seemingly contradictory beliefs. God is omnipotent, meaning he has the power to prevent evil. God is omniscient, meaning he knows when and where evil will occur. God is perfectly good, meaning he would not allow unnecessary suffering. Yet evil exists: wars, diseases, natural disasters, and human cruelty. If God is truly omnipotent, why doesn't he stop it? If he is omniscient, why does he allow it? If he is all good, why doesn't he intervene? This contradiction forces us to ask, is there a reason why evil exists in a world ruled by a benevolent God? Possible explanations. Philosophers and theologians have wrestled with this paradox for centuries, offering several responses. Free will defense. God gave humans free will, allowing them to choose between good and evil. If he removed all evil, he would also remove true freedom, making us mere puppets rather than moral agents. The soul-making theodicy. Suffering builds character. Without pain, we wouldn't develop virtues like courage, empathy, or perseverance. Hardship can lead to spiritual growth, making us stronger. Evil as a necessary contrast. Some argue that good cannot exist without evil. Light has no meaning without darkness. To truly appreciate goodness, we must experience its absence. A greater plan, beyond human understanding. What we see as evil may serve a higher purpose beyond our comprehension. Just as a child doesn't understand why a doctor causes pain with a needle, we may not grasp God's ultimate design. Why does this matter? The problem of evil isn't just a theological puzzle. It affects how we view suffering in our lives. Does hardship mean abandonment, or is there meaning behind it? The paradox challenges both believers and skeptics to reflect on the nature of faith, justice, and the role of suffering in a greater story. Perhaps the ultimate answer is not to eliminate the question, but to wrestle with it, finding meaning in faith, resilience in suffering, and purpose in the paradox itself. Zeno's Achilles and the tortoise, a paradox of motion and infinity. Imagine a race between Achilles, the fastest warrior of ancient Greece, and a slow-moving tortoise. Out of generosity, Achilles gives the tortoise a head start, let's say 10 meters. Given Achilles' incredible speed, he should easily overtake the tortoise, right? Not according to Zeno's paradox. Zeno, a Greek philosopher, argued that Achilles can never catch the tortoise because of an infinite series of steps he must complete. The paradox forces us to question the very nature of motion, suggesting that even the simplest movement, like walking across a room, contains an infinite number of steps. Breaking down the paradox. Zeno's reasoning goes like this. Achilles starts at point A while the tortoise starts 10 meters ahead at point B. Achilles quickly reaches point B, but by then, the tortoise has moved a little farther to point C. When Achilles reaches point C, the tortoise has moved again to point D. This continues indefinitely. The tortoise is always a tiny bit ahead when Achilles arrives at its previous position. If this process goes on forever, Achilles never actually catches up, despite the fact that in reality, he obviously would. Why is this a paradox? Mathematically, Zeno's argument seems sound. It suggests an infinite number of tasks must be completed in a finite time, which seems impossible. However, our real-world experience tells us Achilles does catch the tortoise with ease. So, what's going on? Resolving the paradox. The solution lies in the nature of infinite series. The sum of the distances Achilles must cover follows a geometric sequence. 10 plus 5 plus 2.5 plus 1.25 plus 10 plus 5 plus 2.5 plus 1.25 plus. Despite having infinite terms, this series converges to a finite value. Achilles doesn't take an infinite amount of time. He simply completes the infinite steps in a finite duration. Modern calculus, developed centuries after Zeno, proves that an infinite number of divisions doesn't prevent completion. It just means the total distance and time remain finite. What does this teach us? Zeno's Achilles and the tortoise paradox isn't just about motion. It's about the limits of human intuition. It shows how infinity can distort our understanding of reality and challenges us to think beyond basic logic. In a world that often seems complex and contradictory, this paradox reminds us that some problems exist only in the mind, while reality moves forward regardless. Hilbert's Infinite Hotel, a paradox of infinity that defies logic. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, each already occupied by a guest. It seems like there's no vacancy, right? Now, suppose a new guest arrives, asking for a room. You'd think the hotel is full, but the manager has a trick up his sleeve. This is Hilbert's Infinite Hotel paradox, a mind-bending thought experiment by German mathematician David Hilbert, designed to reveal the strange, counterintuitive nature of infinity. The impossible becomes possible. If a normal hotel is full, there's no space left for new guests. But in an infinite hotel, things work differently. To make room, the manager shifts every current guest one room up. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2. The guest in room 2 moves to room 3. The guest in room 3 moves to room 4. And so on, forever. Since there's no last room, the process never ends, but every guest still has a place, leaving room 1 empty for the new guest. Despite already being full, the infinite hotel somehow accommodates more guests. What if an infinite bus arrives? Now let's push the paradox further. Imagine an infinite bus arrives, packed with an infinite number of new guests. A finite hotel would collapse under this request, but the infinite hotel, no problem. The manager instructs each current guest to move to the room double their current number, room 1 to room 2, room 2 to room 4, room 3 to room 6. Now all odd-numbered rooms, 1, 3, 5, 7, are empty, giving space for the infinite bus passengers to move in. A hotel that was already full has just absorbed an infinite number of extra guests. The paradox of infinity. Hilbert's infinite hotel challenges everything we assume about numbers and space. In our world, full means no room left, but infinity breaks this rule. It shows that infinity isn't just a very large number. It's a concept that follows its own unique logic. Why does this matter? This paradox isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It reshapes how we think about space, time, and even the universe. In physics, concepts of infinite expansion, black holes, and parallel realities all play with the same mind-bending logic. Hilbert's hotel reminds us that infinity defies intuition. But once we embrace its paradoxes, we can unlock deeper truths about reality itself. Gabriel's horn, a shape that defies infinity. Imagine a mathematical object so bizarre that it stretches infinitely, but somehow has finite volume. This is Gabriel's horn, a paradox that challenges our fundamental understanding of infinity, space, and measurement. Named after the biblical archangel Gabriel, whose horn is said to announce the end of time, this paradox reveals how infinity can defy our logic, proving that even when something stretches forever, it can still be contained. Constructing the impossible. Gabriel's horn is formed by taking a simple mathematical function, 1 over x, and rotating it around the x-axis, starting at x equals 1 and extending infinitely to the right. This creates a horn-like shape that gets narrower and narrower but never truly ends. At first glance, you'd assume that since the horn stretches forever, it must contain infinite space inside it. But when we calculate its volume, something strange happens. A reality that breaks intuition. This paradox forces us to confront the weirdness of infinity. It challenges our assumptions about size, measurement, and space. How can something be finite and infinite at the same time? Why does this matter? Gabriel's horn isn't just a theoretical oddity. It mirrors real-world concepts in physics and cosmology. It relates to ideas about black holes, space-time curvature, and quantum fields, where boundaries between finite and infinite become blurred. It teaches us that infinity isn't just big. It plays by rules we barely understand. And sometimes, what seems logically impossible turns out to be mathematically true. Benford's law. Paradox. Why the first digit isn't random. Imagine flipping through a stack of numbers, financial reports, street addresses, stock prices, or even the population of cities. You'd expect that the first digit of these numbers, 1 through 9, would be evenly distributed, right? After all, why should a 1 appear more often than an 8 or 9? But here's where reality defies intuition. According to Benford's law, the number 1 appears as the first digit nearly 30% of the time, while larger digits like 8 or 9 appear far less frequently. This isn't a fluke or a mistake. It's a pattern found across the entire universe, from accounting fraud detection to physics and even election results. Why is this a paradox? At first glance, this seems completely illogical. If numbers were randomly distributed, every digit should have an equal chance of appearing first. But Benford's law reveals that nature and human systems follow an entirely different rule. The explanation lies in how numbers grow. In many real-world scenarios, data follows an exponential pattern. Populations, stock prices, and even physical measurements increase multiplicatively, meaning they spend more time in the lower digit ranges before crossing into higher numbers. Why does this matter? Benford's law isn't just a mathematical curiosity, it's a tool for exposing fraud. When people fake numbers, they tend to assume an even distribution of first digits, but real-world data doesn't behave that way. Auditors, forensic analysts, and even election monitors use this paradox to detect manipulation in tax returns, company profits, and voter rolls. It challenges our basic understanding of randomness and forces us to question assumptions about how numbers behave. In a world where we expect data to be fair and uniform, Benford's law reminds us that reality often operates by its own secret rules. The two envelopes. Paradox. A decision that never ends. Imagine you're given 2 envelopes. One contains twice as much money as the other, but you don't know which. You pick one at random and are then offered a chance to switch. Should you? On the surface, it seems like a simple 50-50 choice. But the paradox emerges when we try to apply logic and probability. Why is this a paradox? The two envelopes. Paradox reveals a flaw in our intuitive understanding of probability. The problem arises because we assume switching always improves our odds, but in reality, the math contradicts itself. It teaches us that sometimes, even when logic appears sound, reality forces us into an infinite loop of doubt. Maxwell's demon, the tiny creature that defies physics. Picture a tiny invisible demon guarding a door between 2 rooms filled with gas molecules. The demon selectively opens and closes the door, letting only fast-moving hot molecules into one side and slow-moving cold molecules into the other. Over time, one side heats up while the other cools down, seemingly creating energy from nothing. This violates the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, disorder, should always increase in a closed system. Why is this a paradox? The second law of thermodynamics is one of the most fundamental principles in physics. It explains why heat flows from hot to cold, why engines lose efficiency, and even why time moves forward. Yet Maxwell's demon appears to reverse entropy, creating a system where energy is organized without any external input. The resolution. Scientists later realized that the demon itself must process information, and this act of measurement and decision-making generates entropy. In other words, the very act of trying to cheat physics creates the energy loss required to keep the laws of thermodynamics intact. The paradox teaches us that while nature allows strange loopholes, it always finds a way to close them. The black hole. Information paradox. Does information disappear forever? Black holes are known for their mind-bending gravity, capable of swallowing everything, including light, with no escape. But there's a bigger mystery hidden inside them. What happens to the information of what falls in? The paradox of information loss. According to quantum mechanics, information about a physical system can never truly disappear. Even if something is destroyed, its information remains encoded in the universe in some way. But black holes appear to break this rule. Anything that falls in is crushed beyond recognition. When the black hole eventually evaporates due to Hawking radiation, all that remains is heat energy. None of the original information seems to survive. This contradicts one of the fundamental laws of physics, that information must always be conserved. If black holes truly erase information, it suggests our understanding of the universe is incomplete. Why this matters. Physicists believe solving this paradox may unlock the deepest secrets of reality, including a theory of quantum gravity that unites Einstein's relativity with quantum mechanics. Some theories suggest that information is somehow preserved in subtle quantum imprints, while others propose that the very nature of space and time needs to be redefined. The black hole information paradox reminds us that even the most well-established scientific principles can be challenged by the strangest places in the universe. The EPR paradox. Can particles communicate faster than light? Imagine two particles created together, flying apart billions of miles across the universe. Now, suppose you measure one of them. Instantly, the other particle's state changes, even though no signal could have traveled between them. How is this possible? This mind-bending phenomenon is at the heart of the EPR paradox, a thought experiment proposed in 1935 by Albert Einstein, Boris Podolsky, and Nathan Rosen. It was meant to highlight a serious contradiction within quantum mechanics, one so bizarre that Einstein famously dismissed it as spooky action at a distance. The paradox of quantum entanglement. According to quantum mechanics, particles can become entangled, meaning their states are linked no matter how far apart they are. If you measure one particle, the state of the other collapses into a corresponding value instantaneously. This defies everything we know about physics. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, no information can travel faster than the speed of light. Yet entangled particles seem to share information instantly. The EPR paradox was designed to expose the flaw in quantum theory. If two particles could affect each other across vast distances instantly, then either quantum mechanics is incomplete, there must be hidden variables that determine the particles' states in advance, and we just don't know them yet. The universe allows information to be transmitted faster than light, breaking one of the fundamental laws of physics. Quantum mechanics versus reality. For years, many physicists sided with Einstein, believing that quantum mechanics was just a weird approximation, not a complete theory. But in the 1960s, physicist John Bell developed a testable inequality to determine whether hidden variables could explain entanglement. Experiments have since shown, again and again, that quantum mechanics is correct. Entanglement is real, and there are no hidden variables secretly controlling the particles. But this makes the paradox even stranger. If entangled particles truly affect each other instantly, it seems as if the entire universe is interconnected in ways we don't yet understand. What does it mean for reality? The EPR paradox forces us to rethink what reality is. If two particles remain connected across infinite distances, does that mean all things are connected? Could the universe itself be a giant quantum system, where every action ripples across space instantly? Physicists are still grappling with the implications. Some theories suggest that entanglement doesn't transmit information, meaning it doesn't actually violate relativity. Others propose that time and space themselves might be emergent properties, not fundamental laws. A universe stranger than fiction. The EPR paradox remains one of the greatest mysteries in physics. It challenges our understanding of space, time, and causality, reminding us that even the deepest truths about reality may still be waiting to be discovered. The arrow paradox. Is motion an illusion? Imagine an archer drawing their bow, releasing an arrow into the sky. As it soars toward its target, you watch its smooth, continuous motion. But what if I told you that, according to one of the most puzzling paradoxes in history, the arrow never actually moves? This is Zeno's arrow paradox, a thought experiment from Zeno of Elea, an ancient Greek philosopher who lived around 450 BCE. His paradox challenges the very concept of motion, suggesting that what we perceive as movement might be nothing more than an illusion. Breaking time into still moments. To understand the paradox, let's freeze time at any given instant while the arrow is in flight. At that exact moment, the arrow is in a single, fixed position. It's not moving forward or backward. Now let's do this again for the next instant, and the next. If at every instant the arrow is motionless, then how can it ever move at all? If time is made up of an infinite series of still moments, then adding up those moments should only result in more stillness. Yet we clearly see the arrow fly. This contradiction is the heart of the arrow paradox. Does motion really exist? Zeno used this paradox to argue that motion is an illusion, just as he did with his Achilles and the tortoise paradox. If time is truly composed of indivisible snapshots, then movement should be impossible. Yet, in the real world, we move, objects fall, and arrows reach their targets. For centuries, philosophers and mathematicians struggled with this paradox. It wasn't until the development of calculus in the 17th century, thanks to Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, that a solution emerged. Calculus allows us to understand motion as the sum of infinitely small changes over time. It shows that even though an object is at a fixed position in any one instant, over an infinite series of such moments, it can still cover a continuous distance. The nature of reality. Zeno's arrow paradox still sparks debates about time, perception, and reality. Does time truly flow, or is it a series of static frames that our minds connect together? Some physicists suggest that our perception of time is just an illusion, and in the quantum world, motion itself behaves in ways we barely understand. In the end, Zeno's paradox forces us to question our reality, reminding us that even something as simple as an arrow in flight might not be as simple as it seems.